Hang me, oh, hang me. It's Coen brothers. Clearly we did not.
We didn't plan any of that.
Rehearse
And that's
that
also not the first line.
Who's that? What are we talking about? What's going on?
Oh, shit.
It's
I didn't
the
even see that there was all these people here.
Which
Holy
is a
shit.
show.
Well,
Yeah.
welcome to the Coen Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of the brothers.
Were you referring to the audience? Are you imagining?
Yeah,
them
I'm
here
referring
now?
to the audience because it's like we're in a show
okay.
and we're like presenting to an audience. This is getting
I
all
guess.
too meta for them. I can already see them shuffling and leaving, so we should probably get to it.
Well, I hate to shatter the reality, but I'm in San Francisco and you're in Los Angeles, so I don't.
What?
They got to start hitching.
What do you
north and south,
mean?
northbound, southbound.
I'm Abe Epperson. Who are you?
Michael Swaim, and we're the Coen Brothers. This is a show where we take a deep dive into the films of the Coen Brothers in chronological order and through three separate spectra: diegesis, pedagogy, and how'd he do that? And more on that later. But first, we should say, speaking of chronology, we're close to the end of this one, at least for the time being. Because we already covered Buster Scruggs because it came out in the midst of the show's run, so that seemed appropriate, and we were too excited. And after this, it's just Hail Caesar, unless you count stuff like Suburbicon, which we don't.
It's got to be written and directed by the Coen Brothers.
And we like to... Ideally, they should be on set and be like the primary creative power on set.
Yeah.
But anyway, we already said it's going to be this one. I don't know why I'm being so suspenseful. Inside Llewyn Davis is penultimate, and then next episode, we'll get into that next episode. But it's appropriate that on our show Frame Rate, where we rate frames, we recently released our A Mighty Wind episode. It's like folk month here on Small Beans. I love it. I don't hear the enthusiasm in your voice, Abe.
No, I'm in awe of your singular purpose here. I do love it.
Folk.
And
love
not
folk.
only that, I've watched this movie like twice in the last week. This is one of my favorite Coen Brothers movie now. So my enthusiasm is at an all-time high.
Do you think part of that is that, like a catchy pop song, the ending's identical to the beginning, so you could theoretically listen to it on repeat / watch it on repeat because it never ends? It just links around, my friend.
That is funny. That is good. I think
some
that's
people
a nice
started
touch.
watching it not knowing what it was, and they'll continue watching it forever.
Yeah,
just
it just
and
keeps
so on.
looping, and they're like, "Why won't this movie stop?"
It's gonna loop you.
It's gonna loop you real bad. I think it's because it's I don't know why it didn't resonate with me so much when it first came out, which is 2013, which is not that long ago. That was 6 years ago.
6 odd years.
But it was I think that Grief is like not my favorite, but this is their Grief film.
Favorite.
But I think it's one of the more. There's something about grief as a human emotion. It's like so multifaceted for everyone, right? And it's one of my favorite things to dissect in storytelling because I gravitate to it and I'm drawn to it because I feel out of sorts with it. Like I don't know how I'll react, and I don't think anyone truly knows how they react when they're in grief. And I know when I'm sad or I'm mad or I find joy in things, these are human emotions that I can do and
Things
feel.
a robot says.
Yes.
$12,000.
But
I am mad. These are human emotions.
But there's something about grief that's ineffable in the way that it can you can have all those kind of going on. And it's absolute
grief
chaos.
is very, very different for every person and every situation. Yeah, it's unpredictable times. Yeah. So
it really hit me home. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I've had a lot of grief in my last 6 years of life. But it just this film just became not just the symbology of things, which we're going to get into later. It's a severely dense film, even for the Coen brothers. But it's also about a topic that I think is very applicable to my life.
But do you think it's about grief?
I do.
Oh,
I think it's about a lot of things, but I think its theme, its main theme, is how a human dissects and discovers how grief affects them, and therefore how they change. Yeah.
Because that's not what I think.
That's great.
Yeah, that's always fun. Um, let's see. What's the first
Or
one?
did you want to say your piece?
No. My piece will get whipped out repeatedly throughout the process.
All right.
You consented when you clicked the link. I had a little bitty question for you, but it slipped my mind, so it'll just come up, I'm sure, organically throughout the process because I took
want to
robust
just go into
notes.
diegesis?
Oh, I guess I was going to give, that's all. I was going to give where I stand as far as favorite versus applicable because, as I believe I said 2 episodes ago, Serious Man is my favorite because it tickles me in an intellectual way, the complexity and the structuralism of it and the games they're playing with structure. And so I still give it to that as far as favorite from like a film analysis, watching it. I deem that the best of films, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But this is the one that it's interesting because I'll still fight that it's not solely about grief at least, but it just through happenstance is the most applicable to my life and life path, very like specifically applicable. It feels like it was a movie written for me. Yeah. And you're very similar to me, and we always talk about how we have same brains, so like that makes sense that you feel that as well. Yeah, it's too resonant. It's upsetting, but
like I feel like being outside of the Jewish faith,
that's what's upsetting. I want to end so bad.
Feel there's, even though I see all of the things at play, there will be a sense of removal of this nostalgia that one might.
Oh, you mean Serious Man is
Serious
steeped
Man.
in Judaism? Yeah.
Yeah, and this one, I've written folk songs. I'm a musician. I'm an artist. So it like feels a little bit like, yeah, that is me. So I don't know. There's something to say to that, I think.
Definitely. So let's start saying it. Mm-hmm. Spinning that big old wheel, but it always lands exactly where we want on the spectrum we call diegesis, which is where we quickly go through without trying, while intentionally trying to not digress into deep philosophical insights, because we like to save that. That's like the fruit at the bottom of the yogurt.
So we kind of want to get through this, but there's so much in this.
Sometimes you have to unpack to make things make sense, so it's sloppy. They're sloppy spectra, much like a prismatic spectrum itself. They bleed. So, but trying to basically talk about things that concretely happen in the movie, what the movie's about. And you know what? Even if you've seen the movie, you end up finding little treats along the way. So we generally go through the plot. This time, how would you rate it complexity-wise? True Grit being simple to explain and Burn After Reading being very time-consuming to explain.
I mean, it depends on. I think that this one is so dense. So the Burn After Reading one,
it is dense. Okay.
Like we have to. I think it's so dense that we have to pick what we want to talk about for the next hour and a half.
It's just interesting because the spectra tip. It's like a movie like Hudsucker. Takes a medium length of time to explain, but it's all diegesis. And then a movie like Serious Man is like pedagogy, thick with pedagogy, fraught with pedagogy. Yeah. And I think this one's somewhere in the middle. It kind of hits on both. The plot is medium complex, and there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, because the plot is like Amblin. It's just a guy going through his life and New York most of the time. That is what happens.
God damn it. I just want to skip to pedagogy. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, but there's so much more because the scenes and the way people talk. That's the dense stuff. So that's where you're going to see us suffer because we're going to be like, and then the cat appears, and we're going to have to hold.
That's the thing is the basic plot points. I mean, I can do it right now, one sentence.
Yeah, right.
A struggling folk singer decides to make a last-ditch effort by traveling to a renowned producer and auditioning for him, doesn't get the gig, gives up on music. The end.
And it says nothing about abortion. It says nothing about cats.
Well, exactly. That's the thing is, because every single mundane action he takes in every scene is philosophically interesting, that ain't the half of it, sister. Because it's like, you're like, okay, but let's really get into it. In this scene, he moves the glass of water to the left. And what do you think that means?
Right, sure.
So we better get going. But another notable thing about it is there's some overlap with Oh Brother, because it is musically driven, not to the same degree, but it shows a deep appreciation of curating folk and celebrating folk music, and I would say it's built around like a few centerpiece folks performances.
Not just that, man. I had a breakthrough researching and watching this. It's also loosely based off the Odyssey, though not the one that you're thinking of.
Really? Because I didn't find that online. I realized that this time. We can't talk about it till later.
I know.
Fuck you.
No,
we'll talk about it later.
It's James Joyce. I had to say it. I had to say it.
No, but we can't unpack it yet.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go.
Because some people who haven't seen it don't even know what the fuck we're talking about. No. What the folk we're talking about. As we alluded to, it ends where it began, which you don't realize at first. And this is another just like, this counts as diegesis, I think, but it is something I only realized this time. So the last image is him getting off stage and getting beaten up in an alleyway by a shadowy figure. And when the movie ends, we see that same scene again. Well, here's what I'm saying. The second scene in the film chronologically is him going to his friend's house to crash the apartment of the gold finds, I think, and he leaves a note, or maybe it's the
Gorfins.
It's the Gorfins. Okay, he leaves a note that's like, "I was a sorry mess last night. Thanks for taking me in." And I just realized that once you realize that scene actually takes place in the future relative to the second scene, that implies some other huge catastrophe. So this will build towards. Also, the Schrodinger's cat analogy runs deep in this. Mm-hmm. There is an unseen catastrophe that occurred in his life before the events of the film that we're not even privy to, that can be whatever you imagine it to be.
Yeah.
Like, why was he on the Gorfins' couch?
Another way of saying it is that it's a cyclic film and it starts on the third scene.
In media res.
That third scene starts like the next morning. That could be any morning, because his life is in kind of a downward spiral, but at the same time cyclic, because it's orbiting around the same events. Like, he gets a little too drunk. He doesn't have a place to sleep, so he sleeps at his like last ditch effort, which are the Gorfins, who are just his last port at storm. Like, they'll always take him in. So that's, when he's burned all other bridges, that's where he'll sleep. So it's got that feeling. But the first two scenes where he sings "Hang Me, Oh Hang Me," and then a man hits him in an alley, that is actually events that you're supposed to also simultaneously believe are at the end of the film.
Yes. And much like James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, because that ends in the middle of a sentence that loops back to the beginning of the book, which starts mid-sentence.
It's very Joycean.
The same structure. It's so good. So I also think we should just point out before moving on that, like, he's not lived up to this expectation. But if you remember seeing this in theaters, I thought Oscar Isaacs was the next everything to me. Like,
this was in an age where he wasn't
it.
He wasn't who he is now, which is Star Wars.
He still turns in great performances, but I don't care about Star Wars, and I don't care about a lot of the stuff.
But he's not like a household name like he is now, and getting all the jobs. He wasn't an A-lister.
Right.
I mean, he's still working on great stuff. I mean, we just said, like, 2017, our favorite films was Annihilation. He's still in great films. I'm not saying anything like that. Like, he's transformed into a sellout or anything like that.
No, I just thought he was going to be in my new Gyllenhaal, and he's not in terms of selection of films. Yeah. But the reason I say that is he learned to play guitar for this film. Obviously, the songs... It's unclear whether they're implying. I think they're implying he wrote them in this universe, like they're originals. Or does Llewyn Davis only do covers? Because that would really change the nature of its treatise on how talented he is. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
but technically, all these songs exist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. A lot of these songs exist. A lot
They
of them
predate
are
the movie,
Peter,
like,
Paul,
hey-
and Mary,
yeah.
who's a figure, symbolic figure. We'll get to more in depth.
Well, and Hang Me, Oh Hang Me is Dave Van Ronk, who has an album cover that looks exactly like the inside Llewyn Davis
So that's
cover. Yeah.
that's there are covers of songs, but it's kind of loosely based, kind of like they're just so fucking protean, the Coen brothers. They're
Everything's so connected.
because what they do is 1 second it's like trying to catch smoke or a cat. It's like they move in and out of their symbolism in a way that it's not like, okay, I understand. So you're doing a 1-to-1 parallel. Dave Von Gronk is Llewyn Davis.
No.
Yes and no. Yes, it's his
yeah.
song. Yes, it's his title. Yes, he did pass on a Peter, Paul, and Mary audition because he thought that he was selling out or something like that.
And he is considered poor man's Bob Dylan, yeah.
But Llewyn is in his own film. It's a closed system. You're not
Right.
supposed to see that. They're just
Now-
loosely taking those, saying like it's based off a true story, kind of like they did in Fargo.
I hate to do this to you on the air, but I need to correct a common Coen Brothers fan mistake. This is Llewyn. You said Llewellyn. That's Llewellyn Moss from No Country.
Yeah, I do that often.
I do it constantly.
Llewyn, you're right. It's Llewyn.
It's Llewyn. I know because I have a cat named Llewyn Davis, so it got drilled into me. So we should progress past the first scene.
So the next morning, after clearly have drank the previous night, he wakes to find himself in a large apartment. It's a Gorfine's apartment. He makes himself breakfast and sees his old record with Timlin, who's his Mike, his deceased bandmate, who killed himself before the events of the film.
His bandmate jumped off some bridge that's not the Golden Gate because Goodman mocks him for it. Yeah.
So he's making himself at home, but as he exits and gets ready for the day, as he's exiting, the short-haired orange tabby cat runs out the door, and he realizes he's locked them both out. So he grabs the cat and kind of tries to give him to the elevator man, but the elevator man keeps saying, "I have to run the elevator."
Yeah, he's Dracula.
Yeah, he's Dracula. So he calls Mitch, who's the man of the house, leaves a message that he has their cat, takes a subway with the cat. The music is fairly well.
Great song.
This is just
all the songs are great.
Great song.
That's
he arrives in a new apartment. Nobody's home. So you just you're not even. No one seems to be. He seems to be in a world of his own, and he can.
But yeah,
just travel through.
He has the classic
any
60s
house.
Greenwich Village lifestyle where he's constantly couch surfing and has every artist is a comrade, etc.
He's even let in through the fire escape, which he asks the doorman, "Can you just let me through the fire escape?" And he's like, "Yeah, no problem." He's not. No one thinks that he's going to rob the place or anything like that. Everyone trusts him and knows him. So it's got this old town folk feeling where everyone knows each other.
So he leaves the cat in this apartment that you don't know whose it is, but it's secure.
He goes to meet. It's secure. Next, he goes to meet his agent, who doesn't seem very active in pursuing his career. Llewyn complains he needs money. He doesn't even have a winter coat. And his agent offers him one, which he turns it down.
I like this system, but I think, so we should go as fast as we can, but then anyone can say slow down and zoom in because I have a thing there. Yeah, we should make that noise. I just realized as you said it that the horrible thing that probably happened off camera was Mike's suicide. That's probably why he's staying at the Gorfiends, because we know that they're close to Mike because of scenes later.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to zoom in because I wrote the quotes down. I think that it's quintessential to Llewyn's nature that in the larger context, you can understand his frustration, but in not being able to regulate himself or in expressing his frustration, whether it's justified or not, people also rightly reflect back to him, I perceive you to be an asshole. And as the people riding very closely along with him on his journey, you can see at all times that he is an asshole and you get why he's upset. And I think this is one of the first scenes where they play that line beautifully because his manager, Mel, sucks. He's like the Flight of the Conchords manager. It's jokes about how he's not doing shit. And he says, "It's cold. I don't even have a coat." And Mel goes, "You don't even have a coat. Take my coat." And he goes, "I don't want your coat. I want you to like work for me. I want money. I need money from the album." And he goes, "No, no, no. Take my coat." And he goes, "I don't want your coat, Mel. What are you going to wear? It's just a big fat fucking bluff." Meaning like you're not going to really give me your coat, then you would have to walk home. It's like 0 degrees. And he goes, "Bluff? I offer you the coat off my, get the fuck out of my office." And then he goes, "Okay, thanks for the coat," and snatches it. And Mel goes, "Shit," and takes the coat back and goes, "I'll give you $40. So again, it's very funny, this like contentious relationship he has with his manager, but it's also very desperate and sad, and like our hero is on the edge of financial destitution. And also I just love the interplay that comes up again and again, like I said, of I can see why Mel thinks he's a prick, but I can see why Llewyn felt like, I have to like start being aggressive. What the fuck else am I supposed to do? I'm starving.
I'd say that that's well said. It's very revealing that everything needs to happen on Llewyn's terms. Like he's going to be an asshole because he can't help but speak the truth. And in the moment, this is the truth of, that's a empty promise that you're giving me, and I'm not going to play the rules that society has given.
It's kind of Catcher in the Rye-ish. He hates nothing more than phonies and phoniness and the idea of being a sellout.
Right.
Yeah.
And he wants to, which is very part and parcel to the folk movement and the beats.
He thinks art is important.
Yeah, and it's just like he wants to throw a gear in the a priori of the authoritarian kind of societal dominant, this is the way it should be. These are the social forays that you have to abide by and stuff like that. He hates that shit, and that's what makes him a prick. But you also kind of go, that's kind of funny. He called that guy out about the coat thing.
And the Coens use all of their skill to make sure that you also feel the impact of, like, Hang Me, Oh Hang Me is a single, like, uncut performance, and they use all of their formidable skill to make you be like, he is good. The songs are fucking haunting and beautiful.
Right.
Yeah,
that's
important.
A tough thing to do.
That's crazy for them to be like, okay, we want to make a movie about a guy who, despite his immense talent, never finds commercial success. Well,
And
now you got to make a
not-
guy immensely talented. It's like when they try to write comedy writers in shows and they're not comedy writers, and you're like, you're not funny enough to pull this off. But
Right.
Oscar Isaacs is like, you're like, man, folk music's good. Folk music is fucking good. Like after the
And this is kind of a testament to T-Bone Burnett, who's the musical.
Thank you.
Carter Burwell didn't do this one. This is the first one he hadn't done. T-Bone has been with them for a while. For example, they both, or all of them, worked together on Oh Brother. But this is T-Bone's show. And what's crazy to me is, like, I just recently watched A Star Is Born, and it's tough because you can definitely tell that what's his face is not a musician, Bradley Cooper. And then Lady Gaga comes up, and you're like, holy fucking shit, she's great. And even though earlier in the film it's not perfect because she doesn't have all the band behind her, and it doesn't really work. But then when she's in full Gaga mode, you go, that is a fucking great performance.
Right.
What's crazy about this film is that because maybe it's a singer-songwriter and it's just a guy on a guitar, and that's all you need.
Are you saying
so that's
John
kind
Goodman's right? Folk music is easy.
No, I mean, I don't know. If it was easy, I would be able to do it.
Yeah,
but,
these songs are beautifully haunting in a way. I don't know.
They're
a huge
good.
folk
They're
proponent.
well
Yeah.
constructed. His voice is pretty damn good. I don't know if that's all him or if that's Oscar Isaac.
Well, there's a lot of
like
acting
auto-tune.
in folk singing, and he's a great actor.
But yeah, it's a lot of acting.
He puts a lot of
So it
emotion
just-
into the songs.
They really they put him through the ringer in terms of, you gotta, like, we're gonna make you a folk pop star kind of thing.
Like, you have to be that
And
good
that's-
that it's believable that your talent being squandered is a tragedy.
And that's
that's hard to achieve.
basing your movie on that single
Yeah.
premise being true and pulling it off is such an arrogant kind of thing. It's like walking into a movie where you're like, I'm gonna make a movie about and the protagonist is a cat, and then you're like, God damn it, I hate working with cats because they never do what they want me to. You could have walked into that movie. The Coen brothers could have made this movie and just be like, every time they're on set, they're like, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
This is not it doesn't play. It's not a great song. If Oscar Isaacs wasn't prepared to do the
and
performances
they're
he
hitting
was.
they know what they're doing too. Yeah, they're setting
They
him
know
up
what
for
they're.
success.
I think they're hedging their bets, and they're like, all right, we're gonna take a lot of work and get this meticulously planned so that it does pull.
T-Bone's gonna pick
off.
the best songs. Yeah, like.
Yeah.
And
There's a
go ahead.
what?
Oh,
Well, there's
you
a little trivia about that, about T-Bone. After Oscar Isaac's first meeting with him, and he was like the advisor, the composer, the musician. He just put on a Tom Waits record and left the room for an hour and said that was the first lesson, is what Isaac said to a reporter.
Yeah.
It was a real Mr. Miyagi moment. I just thought that was really like a funny quote from Oscar Isaac.
Wax
He's just like walks in and says, Tom Waits, bye.
Waits for no man.
That's first session. All right, back to business, right?
Yeah. So he goes back to the apartment with the cat, and the owner of the apartment is there, and you realize it's Jean, who is
Carrie. What's her name? Carrie Mulligan.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, yeah. In context to the story, you quickly realize this is someone he had sex with, but she's with someone else, and she hates his guts because of it. Oh, sorry, I do have to go back because I do think it's worth saying. To aspiring writers and storytellers out there, look at the depth of show don't tell on display in the film, in the sense that when you know how how you really hedge your bets in a screenplay that's based around someone who's a meteoric talent. You either cast Lady Gaga because she is one in real life, or you have a bunch of lines where they get the job and they become famous because all the other characters in the universe say they're so talented. No one ever calls Llewyn Davis good or says his music is good ever in the entire movie. They had to trust that you, the audience, will find it so self-evidently good that you'll disagree with every other character in the movie and be like, no, he is good.
Yep.
Yeah, that is... They set themselves up for failure and then conquered it. But anyway.
Yeah. I also like, there's just a cute little filmic moment where she, in order to tell him that she's pregnant, she writes it on a note, even though like Troy is there.
Yeah, there's a Kenneth from 30 Rock motherfucker named Troy.
Yeah, he's a soldier with a very positive attitude, also a folk singer that comes into play later.
A successful folk singer, which is a trend in the movie, is seeing other people pop off around you, which we can both identify with.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that it's like Exhibit A, a true sellout. Or like, here's the thing, to a normal person who's not bitter or cynical or worried about selling out or phoniness, you can, like, he's perfectly nice, and if he plays a good song and sings a good song, good for him. You know what I mean?
There's nothing fucking wrong with
the
him,
audience
man.
says, like, they say, several people say, yeah, he really connects with the audience. What are you gonna fucking do? He sings it nice. But here's the thing, Llewyn's like, but he's in the army, which is against the ethos of folk, and he's vapid. I talked to him, and he's like, he's dumb and basic and shallow, so he's faking it. It's not real. It's not real art. It's pretend art. And you're like, if he can fake it well enough that the audience can't tell the difference, no one gives a shit, dude. Except you. Only you care. That's the problem with being principled.
Yeah.
So,
and I thought another nice touch that they did when they staged it is that Troy is holding the cat. And so it's like he is not. He's a soldier with a positive attitude. There's something about that shot with Troy behind him behind her holding the cat that speaks to Troy being reliable and likable and put together. Like he's the antithesis of.
He would never cause problems in your life through your association with him. He doesn't get into trouble. Yeah.
Operation of the scene is, I promised Troy the couch. I didn't think you were going to sleep here. We didn't agree to anything. You're like this stray cat is what Gene sees.
Right. And Troy continuously being like, I don't mind. I'll sleep on the floor. And I swear he's
nice.
Perfect because he is that kind of nice where I'm sorry. Like you're like, fuck you. Like you're too nice. Cut the shit. Like no one's this nice. Just stop. It's like
Yeah.
fake nice. And it is phony. And that's why he's a great example of what Llewyn hates. But it's complicated because you can be nice and phony and make small talk and play the game. And so what if he's not deep? Like, who gives a shit?
Or he could be deep, and he's just like, I don't know you enough to
Exactly.
be deep with you yet.
But Llewyn
there's
judges
just too
him
many
immediately,
variables.
as he always does. And you reap what you sow, because the person who we could argue, I think, it's almost so mean that it's inexplicable. Jean is like supernaturally hateful to Llewyn. She hates his fucking guts in like a Veep way, where she invents brilliant sentences to like destroy him constantly.
It's lovely.
So-
it smacks of Maddie Ross.
Yeah. So basically, they have to get out of the. Oh, okay. Before we move on, Jim arrives, and we realize, Jean is in a couple. Jean and Jim, who, as you
Jim is
alluded
not
to,
in the movie yet. Jim is. We haven't seen Jim. Jim is Justin Timberlake.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's later in the movie.
Yeah,
You don't want to talk about Troy's show?
I thought we kind of covered it with. I said, or Troy. All I have written is, Troy plays a show proving you can be naive and stupid and basic and in the army
Right.
and sound just as soulful as Llewyn Davis. The audience doesn't care.
Right.
I think we covered
Okay.
that.
Yeah, they play 500 Miles, which is a Peter,
Yeah.
Paul, and Mary song, and they're very clearly Peter, Paul, and Mary, and they were put together by the same agent that Llewyn Davis has.
Yeah,
So
Mal.
it's almost like he could have been Troy, and he specifically turned it down.
Yes, and also obviously, despite everything she says, there was a point at which Jean like consensually had sex with him, so there was some kind of feelings between
Right.
them. It's like again, as will come up over and over, it's an opportunity that would have taken some effort on Llewyn's part to sort out, but could have benefited him immensely. But he just can't be bothered to compromise his principles at all to sort it out.
Yeah, I also thought that the Poppy sitting down and saying, "Nice song, that Jean, I'd like to fuck her." It shows how people are constantly taking away random nonsense from events, which I think goes into play later, because
Yeah.
Llewyn Davis thinks that Llewyn thinks everything that's happening is happening to him or happening around him, and he's always at the center of attention, more or less. But the reality is that people are grabbing random nonsense off the ground and picking it up and making it about themselves or about someone else. It's just like, it shows that it like really shocks you, because you're in this moment where you're like kind of with Llewyn, and you're like, look at Jean and Jim. They're all so happy. He fucking hates it. He's, rolling his eyes at like how pop sentiment this song is. And no one fucking cares, Like,
Yeah, he's
that's what I thought
Pitchfork.
that
Right, but
that's what that scene
But
was
Jim
about
is
to
in
me.
this scene. This is the scene where Jim arrives.
Jim does
yeah.
arrive in this scene.
And he
yeah,
calls
yeah, I just
Troy an amazing performer, and I think pointedly Llewyn says, and this sums up, I think, the judgment part of it, is he? Does he have a higher function? And that's a question about art that's interesting to ask, that I care about. Like, this is, again, why I feel like I'm Llewyn Davis in a lot of ways. I do care about that. It's important to me that art has a higher function, but I'm able to recognize that most people that question's meaningless. Like, that's a fuck you question. It doesn't apply to Marvel movies, it doesn't apply to riding on a roller coaster. Go fuck yourself.
right.
And so this is when we realize that Justin Timberlake, aka Jim, is Jean's significant other, and that she's worried that she is pregnant. We don't know about the questionable parentage until next scene, but basically Jean leaves to get a drink, and Llewyn Davis asks Jim for a loan, which we can deduce is for an abortion for Jean. And Jim says, but I'd have to tell Jean because there's no secrets between us. And LD says, never mind. Oh, I also just wanted to say real quick, in case it mystified anyone, Poppy is the owner of the club they constantly play at, which is like a folk spot in Greenwich Village, since you mentioned Poppy.
The next morning, Llewyn's on the floor.
Yep.
So Troy's awake eating a bowl of cereal.
Oh,
and
sorry.
there's just some comment bit about that.
I just think it's a
Yeah,
really
what's up?
important image that to hammer home the judginess. Troy says, I want to invite an amazing performer on stage with me, someone I wouldn't be here without.
Oh,
and
right.
he
yeah.
angrily says, I don't have my guitar. Like, fuck you. I wouldn't lower myself to play with you. Not realizing
Oh, man.
he obviously means Jim and Gene, the people he's like staying with and friends with, who are
Yeah.
also folk singers.
What the fuck are you thinking?
yeah.
You're so up your own ass. So yeah, the next morning, Llewyn makes cracks about Troy's robotic, dutiful, disciplined archetype, like we talked about. Troy just shakes it
Do you
off.
plug yourself in somewhere? No. Like, he's just like, I take your insults. That's fine. I don't care. And he says,
After Troy leaves,
are they making you a killing machine? Sorry, I think is the other important dig.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 1-2 punch. It's like I don't think you're a real person, and you're doing deplorable
You stand
things.
for things I disagree with in my art. Yeah.
In different moments in different people's lives, though, both of those things can be true. I don't think that Llewyn or anyone in the audience watching Llewyn do this stuff has any ability to judge Troy about this, and Troy, therefore, he doesn't deserve it.
And yet, I do also think that military spending in America is out of control, for example.
Right.
So it's
sure,
like
yeah.
you can have principles and not be a prick. And the whole point of the movie is that it's very complicated. That's one of the points.
It's very complicated. Yeah, it's not giving you an answer. It's just showing someone who everyone is victim to the flaws and the phases that they're in.
Yes.
That's kind of what the thing is doing. But that's more for later. After Troy leaves to report for duty, Llewyn opens a window to take a cigarette, and the cat gets out again.
I
Llewyn
can't
has
believe
lost the
he's that
cat.
dumb. Yeah.
It's just like, come on, man. You just keep forgetting.
I don't know if
obvious
it's
shit.
intentional, but it is notable that a famous screenwriting trick is to have your protagonist, quote, save the cat.
Save the cat
which is
early,
comes from, like, I believe an old noir detective movie where in the beginning the guy like saves a cat from a storm drain, and you're like, that wasn't important to the plot. No, but it made you really like him from Jump Street. And
Right.
Llewyn Davis literally like loses 2.5 cats depending on how you count it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's and it was got popularized by probably just like inside baseball screenwriter stuff, but popularized mostly for people fairly early in the 90s. In the Blank Check writer Blake Snyder wrote a book called Save the Cat, which is very Sid Screenfield. Like, here's how you write a script on page 30. It does this. It's very like textbook, do these things.
Yeah. So he loses the cat, and then he goes to talk to Gene so that they can talk outside of Jim's earshot about the baby, which is where we get basically, I think, the most emblematic,
I love this
memorable cut down monologue, which is, he says, is there any chance you want to keep the baby? No. Are you sure couldn't it be Jim's? Of course it could fucking be Jim's. But now, even if it's a perfectly good baby, I have to get it aborted anyway because everything you touch turns to shit. You know a doctor, right? And you'll pay for it? Yes. I should have had you wear double condoms. If you ever do it again, which you shouldn't as a favor to people everywhere, but if you do, you should wear condom on condom on condom wrapped in electrical tape because you are shit. You are dangerous to every living being because you are shit.
Yeah, I love it. The beginning of that quote is slightly off,
Yeah.
which I just love, even though you nailed the ending. It's so I have to get rid of a perfectly fine baby. A baby I want because everything you touch turns to shit, like King Midas's idiot brother.
Yeah.
I just love that.
And of course, he has what I think is a very reasonable question. Have you heard the expression?
Right, he's calling her out on her shit.
Have you heard the expression, it takes two to tango?
Right. Like,
And then she says, fuck you, I miss Mike, and you can feel them soften towards each other. So there's an allusion to a previous life maybe where they were better friends because Mike was the linchpin, and now they're just not. But they're aware that in the past they didn't hate each other as much as they do currently.
yeah. This crime of suicide has
really fucked them up.
propelled their lives, and
And then he asks her to leave the window open in case the cat comes back.
It's winter.
It's winter. Yeah, but I lost their cat. I feel bad about it. That's what you feel bad about? Which is like, hey, he can feel bad about the affair and the cat missing. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some...
Yeah.
Gene has some, as we'll see in later scenes, it's very like that. I think they're writing a very like 60s sentiment, 50s, 60s sentiment of gender roles, because it's very like you can tell that Jean is a depressed individual.
Yeah.
Like, she does not think highly of herself, and it's pretty rough.
Yes. Well, and that's just through little hints
in a
that
later
come out
scene,
later,
she says...
So let's go. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
He meets his
next-
sister Joy at their childhood home, basically to ask if the house sold. It's like he's on a quest to get the money for the abortion. That's how this all starts and propels the first leg of the journey. Yeah. He obviously has issues with their dad. Again, he thinks he's a phony in some way, but it never becomes fully clear. Like, he's a square. He's a sellout. Sister doesn't like him cursing in front of her son and says he should join the Merchant Marine, which he used to do, which, if all you whippersnappers out there don't know, it's like a job, being a trucker on the ocean. And it's a job that's decent and stable, and you can always get it if you're qualified and have the licenses and stuff. So it's like your definition of a mundane job that would see you through. And he says, what, quit music, just exist? And she's,
I love this quote.
This is great because, I get up my ass about the importance of our artistic endeavors, and this is how other people must feel hearing that shit. What, quit, just exist? Oh, is that what we do outside of show business? Just exist? It's nice existing. And no, she doesn't sound fully like Harley Quinn, but it's in that ballpark. Then she tries to convince him to take some old pressings of his one record that did okay, which was with his partner, Mike. And he says he doesn't want it because he doesn't want to get out in the world because it's not good enough. That's another thing that artists fall into that's very much me too, except in the podcast realm.
Right.
And nothing's good enough, right? He has to keep working on it. The concept album will be perfect someday, and that will make all his dreams come true. And he says, let me explain. In this business, you don't let your practice shit out. It destroys the mystique. And she says, I'm sorry, I don't know much about entertainment. And he says, yeah, well, don't be sorry, which I love because the subtext is he doesn't even scan that her apology is sarcasm. He really pities her that she doesn't have this connection to art.
Right,
and she's like,
right.
I have a son and a job and the sunshine and the trees and my hobbies. Like, fuck you. You're dismissing the lives of so many people. Like, if you're not a painter, why were you born? It's just such a stupid proposition.
A bit about that existing part. I feel like you orphaned my favorite line, which is just after he says, it's not so bad just existing. And then he comes back with like dad.
Yeah.
Which is such a very like angsty like kid, like
dad worked in a fucking cubicle his whole life and he had a heart attack. He's a fucking
And her
sellout.
response is fucking hilarious to me. You say that about your own father? That he exists? That he exists like that? Like, it's so wonderful because that espouses
she knows
exactly
it
what
is
we were just
insulting.
saying.
He means it as an insult.
She is smart enough to understand all the subtext that he's flirting with.
Yeah.
It's not news to her, all the complex thoughts that you
get it. You think you're deeper than all of us. We get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so, she's just throwing it in his face. Like, you're trying to make it seem like I'm beneath you. But the reality is that I see exactly what's going on. I'm your sister. I'm just as intelligent as you.
Yeah.
I have a lot of wants. This is my choice. This is the choice I made. This is the phase of my life. I'm a mother. I'm doing these things with my life. Go be a mariner and just exist.
She's also like renovating the house, managing the sale. Like, she has shit popping off. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just like, he can't
but
just
it's
exist.
just a normal life. But it's not spectacular.
I don't think he even knows what that means.
Right.
Maybe he does, but like, I think that's what this movie's later kind of will be revealed is kind of about, which I don't want to peel too much into, but I just wanted to point that out for later.
It gets dropped. I forget exactly how. Oh no. Okay. Well, we should have mentioned it earlier.
On the phone.
But through conversation with Troy before he bounces, we just find out that there's this mythical producer, Bud Grossman, who runs a print called The Gate of Horn, and I cannot stress enough, and it'll move things along nicely, is the Wizard of Oz. Structurally is the Wizard of Oz. Like, you have to go on a quest and if you get his approval, you're set for life and blah, blah, blah.
In most Coen Brothers movies, there's a quote unquote great man.
Yes.
That
they do love
it's all
that.
leading up to.
And what's interesting is In this, they don't fixate on him much. Like, Llewyn is initially just trying to scrounge up enough money for an abortion, but you get little hints enough that if you're a savvy film watcher, I feel like you're like, he's gonna end up going to the Gate of Horn. There's like a gravitational pull towards that. So he calls the Gore Fiends. He lies about the cat being lost to buy a little time to try and find it. It's now loose in the city. But the Gore Fiend dude was actually calling to tell him he got a gig from Jim, Justin Timberlake. So he goes to Columbia Records to play the gig, where things become awkward because he didn't bring his guitar. He was told he didn't need it. Then the first thing the guy says when he meets him is, "Where's your guitar?"
It's because he left it at the house
Yeah.
because he went to see his sister. So his life is, he's not prepared.
He's
for
always a
anything.
step behind. They ask if he
Yeah.
can read charts, and he says, like, no, I'm just good at playing the guitar. So it's like, he's good, but he's not cut out of the professional mold. You know, it's this kind of scene. Jim teaches him the song, says it's not the most serious thing we've ever written, but they're paying us good money. It's poppy, it's folky, here's our thing. They workshop it, and to the audience ear, I think it's objectively meant to be stupid. It's like it's like the
got
folk
Adam
song
Driver
equivalent
going,
of I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. You're like, yeah, it's catchy, but it's nothing. It's stupid.
It harkens of like old cowboy, like 50s, 60s kind of throwbacks.
It's about going into outer space.
It's really bizarre. In the way that, that kind of culture and pop was at the time because of what the Beatles
And
were
Peter,
doing
Paul, and
stuff
Mary
like
did
that.
indulge in that,
Peter,
that
Paul.
novelty undercurrent. So
Yeah.
ultimately, Llewyn sort of shows his ass because he says, hey, man, I'm happy for the gig, but who wrote this? You know, like you can hear it in his voice. Who wrote this?
Exactly.
And he goes, oh, I did. And he goes, okay. He just says,
And
okay.
Jim is hurt by this.
Yeah. And it's, again, you're like, leading up to that moment, I agree with Llewyn. It has to be said, this song sucks. And then when he says it, you're like, you're kind of an asshole. It's both. Both are true.
It's both.
Yeah.
Both are true. So even though he signed with Mel, he decides to go contract because he needs the money now, which is $200.
So yeah,
which
they
is
offer
perfect
him
for
a
the abortion.
dilemma. You can take $200 now, which is the magical movie number he needs to get an abortion.
But the important
Or-
part is that he's not within the union, so he doesn't get the royalties or credit on the album. But he's fine with that because he doesn't
Yes.
see there's a future in the song or anything, and it won't give him any forward momentum in his career.
And man, you don't even basic movie watch. I'm like, it is broadcast loud and clear, which takes a very sure hand at the wheel. But like, you immediately know, even as he's saying it, you're like, well, that song's gonna make $1 billion, you moron.
Yeah, because everything's not going right. And then, of course, in like Llewyn fashion, he forces Adam Driver, aka Al Cody, to let him crash on his couch. He like basically forces him, like, "Hey, you got an apartment? You got a
After
couch?"
he thinks this guy is the stupidest guy of a stupid thing. And then he's
Right.
like, but can I crash on your couch, though? So he's willing
just
to be
using
a
people.
drain and a parasite on people who are willing to sell out to maintain his sense that he hasn't sold out, which is
Yeah,
a
that's what
tactic
he
I
thinks.
see artists pursue frequently in real life.
Right. So after that, he visits Mel. Random Coen Brothers scene work. Mel is out for a funeral. I guess he likes funerals. It's just like the idea of...
sorry, yeah.
I think when they sat down and write this stuff, sometimes they go like, what was the last excuse? Well, we talked about funerals in the last like scene. It might be funny for him to just be like, Llewyn would be like, man, that guy likes funerals.
Orphan line.
But it also
Yeah.
harkens to the fact
I
that
want
he's
to
old
quote
and
it. I
people
wrote
are
it
dying.
down because I thought it was real funny. Another funeral. Yeah, he's at a funeral. He likes people. Yeah, less and less of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Witty,
It's
witty.
a good dig
Llewyn
on dead
is
people,
witty.
Llewyn.
Take that, dead
Yeah.
people. Suck on a worm.
Dunking on dead people.
Dunking on the dead.
Secretary mentions there's no mail for him. Mike and Llewyn's records are going to be thrown out because they're moving things storage. It doesn't really matter.
And he doesn't
But Mel
want
left a
them
box
anyway.
of.
They're too painful.
There's just too many of them. But he
Yeah.
left a box of the records. For
Oh no, he
Llewyn.
does take them. He takes them.
And he says, "What am I going to do with them?" But he takes them. He
Yeah.
reviews it. So he goes back to Gene and Jim's to get his guitar, and Gene does not want to meet at the apartment. You know, she wants to find public common
Ooh,
ground. So
sorry.
they meet in a coffee shop.
Previous point. I just want to point out Well, he's staying at Adam Driver's place, who, again, is a different version of Troy. He's perfectly nice and going about his business, but Llewyn hates him because he's achieving success in a way that Llewyn doesn't approve of. He wears a cowboy hat. He changed his name for the stage. It's not Al Cody. It's something like Mundane, I forget. And he ends up finding a copy of Driver's debut album in his apartment, in Adam Driver's apartment, called 5 and 20 Questions, which is a stupid-ass, corny-ass name for an album, and the cover's really stupid. And you can tell he thinks it's stupid, but I think it's an important point that, like, everyone has an artistic dream, and it's important to them. Even if you think it's corny, or like if you look down on country music, say, there are people who grew up with country music and their dreams to write country music, and just let them fucking enjoy it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Why is it important that you occupy yourself? That's his
Or that you decide which is
you
best.
Occupy yourself
Yeah.
with hurting people. It's not.
So sorry,
important.
you're saying he goes to pick up his stuff from Gene's apartment again.
They meet in a coffee shop, which is like neutral ground. He says he's got the money for the abortion. And they, of course, like in like fashion, like every other scene they've been in, they start to lay into each other about her being a careerist and him being a loser. Gene says that he just doesn't want to go anywhere and just sleeps with, this is the quote that I was thinking of, that, wow, this is really revealing of Gene. She says, and quote, just sleeps with other people's women.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy because it's indicative of like the times and the gender politics and all of that, but it's also indicative of how she perceives herself as not being hers.
Did you write
like
that
she's
chunk
someone
down?
else's?
The dialogue?
No, feel free
All
to
right,
read it.
here we go. Do you ever think of the future? What, flying cars, hotels on the moon? That's your problem. You've blueprinted the future. If music is your way to get to the suburbs and a nice house with Jim, yeah, it's a little careerist, and it's a little square, and it's a little sad. That's Llewyn on Gene. And then Gene on Llewyn is, you're sad. Me and Jim are getting somewhere. You don't want to go anywhere. You get nowhere because you like it that way and because you fuck other people's women. Whose couch are you crashing on tonight? I told you, Al Cody, you don't listen. You just spout vitriol. It reminded me of the Squid and Whale in the sense that the scripting of the fighting is so real and so cutting that it's uncomfortable to be in those scenes, for me anyway.
Yeah,
they're rough.
Which is, I also love the parallels here because
And the close lenses when she's digging. Oh,
when they're digging into each other, like when Gene's going on Llewyn, it's said by a woman who resists saying that she's sad. And when he accuses her, he's saying that she only spits vitriol, which the reality is they're both doing what they're doing what they're accusing the other person of doing.
and they're both
like
doing
she
it, yeah.
is resisting that she's sad,
and he's spouting vitriol.
and he's resisting that he doesn't spit vitriol.
Yeah.
So it's just like crazy how short-sighted. Just then he sees the cat. Great screenwriter trope. If you need, sometimes serendipity kicks in. If you need to get out of something, it's not the
But it's not
most elegant.
serendipity because we find out that's just a random cat. It's a different
It's another
cat.
random cat.
So it's
Some other
not
cat.
serendipity. I love that.
Yeah, but he sees it and he says, "Just stay here. I gotta go get something." Goes and grabs the cat and returns it.
Yeah. And did you get these
Next scene.
quotes? Okay, sorry.
Oh,
I think this
feel
is
free.
real important and telling. Okay, where were we? He says as he sits down with the cat, she says, you were calling me careerist and I was calling you a loser. And he says, well, those are the two categories. And she says, no, those are your categories. Like, you define the categories that you slot people into. That's in your head.
Is this the
Yeah.
in my experience line?
No, that's it. I like the, no, those are your categories.
I just thought it was a
And he
memorable
says, well,
quote
yeah,
because
in
I
my
liked
experience.
it. In my experience, the world is divided into two types of people. Those who divide the world into two types of people. And then she says, and losers.
yeah.
It's just like
And
a
those
funny,
who know
like,
binary.
all right.
Yeah. On his, he heads home. He helps Al Cody move some boxes out of his tiny apartment that looks identical to Jim and Gene's. I think there's just an underlying joke that all the folk people in Greenwich Village live in like these dingy interchangeable apartments that all look the same. He finds out Al Cody's real name is Arthur Milgram. And Al Cody says, because I'm helping another folk guy out, loaning him my car. The car I own is going to Chicago on Thursday. if you happen to need a ride to Chicago or want to go to Chicago for some reason. So it's this network of musicians who are all poor just helping each other. And Llewyn Davis is like, no, I have no reason to go there. But you, the audience, know that's where Bud Grossman is. So he'll end up going soon.
Yeah, it's crazy. And at this point, when you're watching the movie, or at least I was every time I watch it, the things Llewyn at this point is in debt for, where he'll sleep in a few days, where he's sleeping tonight, it all gets so confusing in your head. And how does like he keep track of it? It doesn't matter.
Like
he
where the cat is and
at
whose
Al's
cat it
department.
even is. Yeah.
Right.
So then he goes to the doctor's office. You take the scene.
Yeah, he goes to the OBGYN, and the doc turns down Llewyn's money because, as it turns out, the woman that he had an abortion with last time.
Last time he accidentally impregnated someone.
Yeah, was a woman by the name of Diane. He learns in the scene that she didn't get the abortion. They move to Akron.
The doctor's like, "What do you mean? I owe you one abortion.
I owe you an abortion. This one's pro bono." And she moved to Akron, and so he's got a kid out there.
His kid is about to turn 2, which is, I think, very intentionally a prime time to reconnect with your child. Like, if you made the effort, no matter how difficult it is, you'd be good. That's a good time. Yeah, it's not too late to save it. So that's in your head as a question. Oh, is this kid going to come up? Why did this happen in the movie?
And
where's the payoff?
You remember Akron.
Yeah. Akron, Ohio is where the kid is. So he goes to the Gore Fiends to drop off the cat, which he thinks he's recovered.
By the way, halfway between New York and Chicago.
Oh, really? So, Akron, Ohio? That's beautiful.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
He goes to the Gore Fiends to drop off the cat, and they sort of pull him into having dinner. And again, like the scene, I think, like the scene where you realize he's an asshole at the same time that you understand where he's coming from with Mel in the coat. He does a thing that I understand why artists feel that way, because it becomes muddied what your personal and work time is, and it becomes muddied what your personal and professional and like public space is. Because when you have a talent that's fun to experience, like being able to play guitar and sing really well, people ask you to do that at parties and stuff. And I know comedians hate, especially people who are primarily writers.
Yeah. Oh, you're a comedian? Tell me
a joke right now. You're like, it super doesn't work like that. That it's going to suck.
Why not? If you're a comedian, you're funny. Be funny. And then you, in your head, you go, fuck, they're right. I should just be able to be funny.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a real confidence destroyer when people just come up to me and go, make me laugh like right now. Oh, you're a comedian? Make me laugh right now. Yeah. But it reminded me of the Sorry to Bother You scene that really hit me the hardest, where they make him rap and they all chant back at him.
Right.
But basically, so I got this fancy couple who work at the Columbia Department of Sociology, which is a clear flag that, like, they appreciate folk. You know what I mean? They're like foodies. They appreciate folk. But at the end of the day, Llewyn would judge them. Llewyn does think they're squares and fake, if merely for the fact that they have financial stability and they live in a nice home and stuff. And they're square. They're dorky. They're lame. And Gorfie knows it. Like he says, we're his last resort. He's not an Upper West Side guy. So there's this vibe that Llewyn's like too cool to be there. And then they ask him to play music for their dinner guests, who he also thinks are losers because they're going to name their child Howard Greenfung, which is objectively a dorky bad name. But he didn't have to be a prick. He says, you're kidding, right? And it's like, you don't say that, man.
Can I go a little bit earlier,
Please.
just because I think there's a great joke for musicians out there? When they're introducing Llewyn to the group, one of the people's name is Joe Flom, another funny fucking name. And he is a guy who plays he's interested in early music. He's professorial. He's probably just teaching theory of early classical music. And he plays like the harpsichord. So he's like completely outdated and stuff like
he's
that.
He's an academic
like, you're also a
about music, and they compare them as if they're the same, which you can tell offends Llewyn.
And they briefly talk about piano, where Llewyn mentions his piano teacher, probably when he was like, a kid. And so Joe Flom, does she play early music? Llewyn goes, Harry James on the radio, on the piano, drink to me with only thine eyes. She was not a singer. And then, or she was not a swinger. And then he responds, well, Harry James. And then he says, okay, well, her playing that was pretty on beat. So I want to dissect that joke for a second. It's a good music joke because early music means like that early classical music. Harry James is a big pop, big band artist. Drink to Me with Thine Own Eyes is a classic love ballad, and it's like an operatic. Harry James played swing music, so that's that pun on the beat. Because that's on the beat
Swing
means like standard time
off
signature
the beat, yeah.
is slightly off. So saying that she played it poorly, but in 60s terms where it's on the beat, means that in today's terms it was like she played it really well, but he's making the joke
that's square.
That's swing. Yeah. So and that it's square versus swing. So it's digging at the stuffiness of Joe, but saying a pun just for himself in the room.
But also
that she wasn't a
proving
good player.
I know music too, dude. Don't fuck with me.
Yeah. So no one in the rooms gets the joke, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
It's
situations
so
like
well
that
done.
are great. And then a little later in dinner, they try to get him to play. He says, I'm not a trained poodle. And the lady Gorfine, I don't remember the Gorfine's first names, but the lady of the house says,
Mitch and Lillian
says, I thought singing was a joyous expression of the soul, which is a beautiful crystalline moment for me because I can see why it bothers him to be put on the spot. But if he was open to being able to hear her through his haze of cynicism, she's right. He needs to reconnect with the joy of his art. Singing is a joyous expression of the soul, and he agrees with that, but like he can't do that, not lately, you know? So he says, sort of another good music joke, I think, this one's early, Joe should like it, meaning that he's just going to play a folk song from like 10 years ago, whereas of course Joe means early music.
Which is funny because the first real line of the movie that isn't a song is a quote from Llewyn saying, probably heard that one before. If it was never new and never gets old, then it's a folk song.
Yeah, which is the tip off ultimately that the last scene is the same scene as that line stands out.
Right, it's never early.
So
so good.
Things boil over when Lillian starts singing the harmony to the song that he is playing.
Mike's
and
part.
He stops it and goes, don't do that. And she goes, it's Mike's part. Mike is dead partner. In fact, this scene organically is how the audience deduces, oh, Mike killed himself. Oh, Mike was his partner. This is where it like comes out screenplay wise. And I just wrote down the quote. It's Mike's part. I know what it is. Don't do that. This is bullshit. You know, I do this for a living. It's not a fucking parlor game. This is how I pay the fucking rent, which he doesn't do, by the way. Sorry for fucking up your evening. And then she cries and runs out of the room, and he goes, well, she doesn't have to go. Obviously, I'm going to go. Obviously. And then,
it's hilarious.
Then she just screams and runs in with the cat and holds it up and goes, this is not our cat. It's not even male. Where is its scrotum, Llewyn? Where is its scrotum?
Which is, I mean...
It's a classic Coen humor moment. They like going in that direction.
Yeah, and plus you're like, Robin Bartlett, the actress who plays Lillian.
She kills it.
Can you come in here and we just want to hear you get really angry at us and yell, where's its scrotum? It's just one of those moments that you're like, they're at their job right now.
Oh, yeah. With like up-angled shots so it seems really heavy.
See the cat. Yeah. Another bridge burned.
Now he's got no couch to crash on, so he decides to go to Chicago after all. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, because he's
You want to introduce us to Roland Turner, Abe?
Yeah, Roland Turner and Johnny Fives. Or Johnny Five. Not the robot, though. Not Short Circuit Johnny Five. So the next morning he catches a ride to Chicago, as you said. It's Roland, a jazz player, is in the back, and he's always basically sleeping. Of course, he's played by John Goodman.
Of course.
I
can't believe you even brought up that he might not be.
Yeah, it's a perfect role for him. And it's also, we mentioned Oh Brother before, they love to do this with John Goodman at this point.
If this is the Odyssey, this would be the second time he's played the Cyclops allegorically for the Coen brothers. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's a one-to-one
It is not a one-to-one.
It's
about. Sloppy.
We're going to talk about that.
But there's something
there. It's sloppy,
there.
but there's something there. I'll go into it. I kind of have a loose theory
pedagogy,
about
my friend.
Yeah, I know. You brought it up. So Johnny Five is the driver, and he's just laconic and just
Great word.
He's just not present. Yeah.
Fargo style.
So
yeah.
Fargo style, just
Stormare.
not a speaker. So yeah, hitching a ride. Roland has digestion issues, so I have to park a bunch of times, is what he says. The whole time he shits on Llewyn for his name being Welsh, having a cat and a folk singer, and being a folk singer.
Dude, his only...
By the way, I wanted to...
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that Llewyn, I looked into this, is indeed a Welsh name, and it stands for something like... it stands for like person of lions, or it represents cats.
Of lions. Oh, cat-like, Leonid.
Like it's cat-like,
Leonid.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so awesome, because obviously... Oh, and we skipped the line that's the tip-off, but...
Yeah, you do it.
We won't... No. But I'm not going to unpack it at all now, but I think one of the main symbolic conclusions that most audience members come to through the first viewing is something about him and the cats. He's the cats, or the cats are him, and we'll unpack that in more detail. But the tip-off line we skipped is actually very early in the film. Someone mishears, and he's saying, "I'm Llewyn Davis. I need to do this with this cat." And they go, "Llewyn is the cat?" And he goes, "No, I'm the cat. I'm Llewyn." Like, he misspeaks, and you're like, okay, he's the cat. So you're like geared up to view the film that way.
Right. On the road, Roland and Llewyn continue their like tete-a-tete,
Okay,
which
so
is really...
I'm just going to rattle through quotes of this if I could. Fast. But this movie, more than any of theirs, the cut downs are so brutal and vicious, they actually upset me. Like him and Gene. So here, but they're funny and clever. But Jesus, the cruelty on display. People are so mean. Like, Llewyn really does just soak up the world's shit. So he says, "This is my valet, Johnny Five. What are you, a flamenco dancer? What's your name, Pablo?" So he's like, "You look gay and you have color to your skin, so I'm going to assume you're Central American or something." Never shuts up. All he does the entire drive is tell stories. So to me, he is the example of the direction Llewyn's headed in, because all he does is tell stories that say why he's good. He's the good guy, and he's important because he plays jazz, which is a dying, important, authentic art form. Yeah. And everyone's beneath me because of that. And all I do with every second of life is either be on heroin asleep or talk about how other people are worse than me. And it's depressing as hell. So he goes, "Grown man with a cat. Is that part of your act?" So again, these aren't all in order or word perfect, but a bunch of his digs. "Folk songs. I thought you said you were a musician." "So you have a cat. Are you queer?" And Llewyn says, "No, I just didn't know what to do with the cat." "Oh, so did you bring your dick along too?" Because you don't know what to do with it. And he goes, now it's, they pull up to a gas station. He goes, "Your turn to pay for gas, Elwyn." So like he doesn't know his name. Later on, more quotes while they're just driving. This is when it gets really bad. "In jazz, we play all the notes, 12 notes on a scale, dipshit, not 3 chords on an ukulele. C, C, G, C, D, G. What happened to your friend? He threw himself off the George Washington Bridge." Now, who does that? Now, traditionally, one throws oneself off the Brooklyn Bridge. Was he a half-wit? And he says, Llewyn has been soaking this up for days, and he finally says something back, which is, "Hey, how far do you think your cane would fit up your ass? All the way, or would some stay sticking out?" And he goes, like, "But here's the thing, mister. Threats don't work with me, because I know Santeria." This is the one I'm gonna like paraphrase, but he's goes on this long monologue about
voodoo
he learned voodoo, Santeria, which aren't even the same thing, from priests in the swamp, and which use squares. So he calls Llewyn a square, who very specifically calls other people squares to put them down. "You squares would call black magic due to a lack of understanding. Your liver will fail. I'll cast a spell, whatever the fuck. Or maybe one day you'll just wake up and go, why is my life shit?" It's this ominous fucking foreboding. So anyway, That's the
Yeah,
vibe
it's-
of that car ride.
Yeah, it's a real positive vibe. When they get off the road, it's the only time. Well, actually, before he goes, when no one's particularly listening and they're still in the car, I think it's important to note that Johnny Five just says, while Llewyn's like waking up, it's like unsure if he's saying it for the benefit of Llewyn, but he says clean asshole poems and smiling vegetable songs, Orlovsky.
Yeah.
And Orlovsky was a veteran that Ginsberg met, which is just interesting because of the parallels between Troy and such.
I think it's
and
because
it was encouraged him to write.
I think it's because Llewyn played Green Green Rocky Road as they drove, and
Oh,
Johnny
yeah, that's
Five
true.
comes to realize, oh, this guy is
Good
kind of
call.
an artist who has chops, because Johnny Five doesn't talk the whole time, and then after he plays Green Green Rocky Road the next morning as he's waking up, Johnny Five basically says, like you said, that very short quote, that if you know what all the
Know
words
it.
reference,
You know he's a beat.
you know that Johnny Five is a beat poet who wants to be on stage or reciting poetry. So
Right.
this terse guy who seemed like the least artistically turned on or like activated of anyone in the movie also has an art-related dream that he's obviously not fulfilling.
Right.
Like
So
so many
Johnny
people
Five's-
around you are dealing with this, you know?
Yeah. He also mentions that he did 3 weeks in the brig, which isn't what you think it is. It's not that he spent 3 weeks
In
in
jail
jail,
on a ship.
although it might as well. It's actually the brig was such a play that was like
Yes,
big in New
it's
York.
a play.
Which means A, he's an actor, and then he says closed by the cops, long story. Historically what that story is that the short version of the long story for those interested is that the brig was a less than flattering depiction of life in a Marine prison, where it shows the Marines as a very authoritative kind of like almost Catch-22-esque,
Yeah.
like treating the prisoners like subhuman.
And
And
it
the
got
show was
shut
such a
down.
sensation
Yeah.
that congressional hearings were called to investigate the events, and they got the show shut down. So Johnny Five might be saying that the price of authenticity is that you get crushed by the authorities, or like we don't know what he's saying.
We don't know the status
But,
of his journey.
we just
'cause
know-
he's a very terse young
Yeah.
man. But it's this
I just-
tiny reveal that you're like, everyone around you has shit going on, and everyone contains multitudes. Even
Right.
Johnny Five, who's just the driver who never speaks.
I don't think it's truly pedagogy, but I think it's just to say it's important that you kind of look at with this drive is kind of like it feels like going down the river Styx with two versions of yourselves, because these are
Yes.
two guys who play the tortured artist types.
Yep.
And it's kind of a glimpse into Davis's future. He has to choose to be the curmudgeon.
Much like a prism
you know-
splits light, it's like, this is throughout the whole movie, he gets examples thrust before him of all the different butterfly effect paths that his journey is likely to take, all the different types that come out of this process. And you keep wondering what he's going to choose to do, or if he's just going to let things be done to him, or what.
Like, is this what it means to be authentic? These two guys,
Or does
One or the other,
or is
both?
his version of authenticity doing nothing because you're so authentic, you're paralyzed, anything would be selling out, you know? Which is Gene's accusation, is you fail because you want to fail.
Exactly.
Oh shit, it's pedagogy.
We find that Roland has been going to the bathroom so much, not because of his aforementioned, digestion issues, because he's a heroin addict, and
as is
he falls-
authentic to a jazz head. I feel like he
Yeah,
does it because
so-
he wants the whole experience, you know?
Yeah, so he's in the bathroom drooling, tube tied on his arm. He's not dead. They're on the road again. Johnny Five has been pulled off to the side of the highway to nap because everyone else was sleeping, and it was a long ride. And the cops bang on the window, and he gets arrested. And it's bizarre because the cop is instantly goes to 100, and they take off, leaving Llewyn with Roland. But
With
no keys.
Knotted off
So
Roland, no keys, and the cat.
There's no due process here. There's no protocol.
But think about this
which kind of
way.
speaks to the beat kindness of Johnny Five's character. He's just gone forever.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Johnny Five just gets hauled away like at the beginning of that fucking George A. Romero jousting movie we watched. He's just that dude. But check out that frame rate with Soren
Night Riders,
Bowie.
yeah.
Night Riders, great episode. But of course it is a beat poet's role to get hassled by the cops and hauled away for nothing, for not doing nothing. But I also think it's really interesting that Llewyn Davis is now in an altered but very philosophically similar situation to there was a locked room and he and the cat are outside. Now there's a locked room and he and the cat are inside.
Yeah.
So in the first case, it wasn't his fault that the cat's in danger. With good intentions, he mistakenly let the cat out and now he can't get back in. In this case, he intentionally leaves the cat in the car and goes about his business, which is not... There could have been worse things, like letting the cat out into the wild, probably more dangerous, but leaving it in the car with the knotted out heroin addict is basically abdicating all responsibility for the cat, which is just a shitty, fucked up, lazy thing to do. After
we'll find out what happens to the cat.
Right, but it's this, you thought that the cat mattered to him only because they've spent time together, and you realize that he's so honed in, he feels like, it's like in Whiplash. He's like, no, I'm an artist. I can't have things like friends, cats. Like, I have to just keep going.
These are burdens to the art.
Yeah.
So
and that's
he
the
leaves
last we
behind.
see John Goodman ever in the movie, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
And before we move
he goes
on,
to Chicago.
An image that I just know we won't mention later that's great. When he's in the shitter about to hear John Goodman OD, he happens to see serendipitous graffiti that just says, "What are you doing?" That's very resonant to me.
It's very beat too.
Yeah.
To see like a resonant graffiti wall.
So he gets to Chicago finally just by hitchhiking.
The gate's a horn after he just kind of sleeps around like random places in order to get there.
He gets soaking wet in the snow.
It's not important.
He's at his
it's
last
it's
end of his
paying
rope.
homage to. Yeah, he's paying homage to. This is the Coen brothers paying homage to like the road movie. It's just like it's like montages of people sleeping at places.
But they also
driving
really
places.
push it of like
over music.
His clothes are worn through, his shoes are soaked. Like this better work. He's pretty fucked.
A lot of cops knock on windows and go like, "Move along, fucking bum."
But from a craftsman perspective, I did write down, and I just want to appreciate the sheer efficiency of show don't tell. In the scene, it's a one shot. Cut to Llewyn's asleep at a bench in the bus station. Just the leg and the arm of a cop approach and enter frame. The cop knocks on the thing with a nightstick. Llewyn wakes up, and the cop in a friendly voice says, "Hey, what train are you waiting for?" Cut out of scene. It's one line. It's one. Do you know, like in any other movie, that would be 8 lines. Like the efficiency.
We would actually
is
sit there and go through like the typical scene we've all seen 100 times, where it's like, "Oh yes,
move along."
Now you're going. Move along. Oh, you fucking
God, they're so efficient.
Yeah, they're just like, and then that happened.
He gets to Bud Grossman's office.
He gets to the gates of horn. Yeah, and the guy had. This is the guy that supposedly. Was sent the records. Mel sent the records a month ago. Grossman has not received any records, so it kind of says a lot.
Or has no faith in Llewyn because he did do good work for Troy.
Exactly.
Even Bud Grossman is like, "Oh yeah, he did send Troy's shit. Troy, he has a future. I like that kid."
And so Grossman's this great man who could solve everything for him, and Grossman does exactly what the Gorfians did, which is like, "All right, sell it. Play me a song."
Yeah, he goes, "I'm a great musician," is the subtext, and he goes,
"But you're right here.
All right,
might as well just play.
Play me something from Inside Llewyn Davis." Title drop and name of the album.
Yeah. And so, by the way, here's where I want to note that you're slightly off when you said what John Goodman said it was G G C G C D G, which is what he plays in this
Death of Queen
song.
Jane. That's the chord progression.
That's the chord progression.
But that's the
during
thing
the segment of it.
His picking and his hammers on and off, and the acting in his voice.
Pretty good.
It takes a lot of skill to play the song that well. It doesn't matter how simple the chord progression is.
Yeah. But it's just funny that, like, for that song,
dude,
it's exactly what John
Well,
Goodman
it's totally to put him in his place.
Reference.
You're like, you think you're better than everyone around you because you're good at one very narrow thing that most people aren't even interested in, folk music. And yes, you do it great and it has an emotional impact. I think I'm better than you because I'm good at an even narrower thing, jazz, that even fewer people care about. It's like, where does this end, Llewyn? Is that what you want to be?
So Bud Grossman says the most the worst thing you could ever say to him. I got the quote. I don't see a lot of money here.
And he is in shadow, and Bud Grossman is in a beautiful, angelic, halated light.
Yeah. You're okay. You're not green. So I don't have what Troy Nelson has. Good kid. He connects with people.
Oh, you know Troy? Good kid. Good kid. He connects
Next
with
scene,
people.
he finds a driver going back to New Jersey.
Yeah, so I don't see a lot of money here.
Career over.
Anyone who's struggled in a creative industry that is a business before it is an art form, but you care more about art and that's why you got into it. That's like Mr. White getting gut shot in Reservoir Dogs. Like, that moment is brutal, dude. Brutal. Mr. Orange getting gut shot. Sorry.
And the appending to the scene, the bitter, like,
it's so true. It's a business.
He's like, I could see you as a part of a duo.
Oh, he gives him an option to progress in a minor way if he wants. The quote is, if you cut that down to a goatee, stay out of the sun, I can put you with a trio. Are you good with harmonies? So I just want to unpack the subtext very simply. I'm only shallow. I care about your looks. I'm also racist, but I am offering you an opportunity. You'll have to compromise with 2 other people. Are you good with harmonies? AKA, are you good at working with other people? Yes. The subtext, that short line is so packed with, look, Llewyn, this is it. But it comes with this and this and this. Yeah, the guy you'll have to work for really is a prick. He's fucking racist.
Please, Mr. Kennedy.
And he says, are you good with harmonies? No. I mean, yes, I am, but no, I had a partner. And he says, well, that makes sense. As if to say, oh, I can tell that you're incomplete.
You're not good.
You come
with
across as
either.
Incomplete. Yeah. And he says
he's assuming, I think, that they broke up. The reality.
Which to me, the most haunting line as someone who's dealt with suicidal thoughts, on and off in my life is, my advice, get back together. Now, he doesn't know what he's saying, but the subtext of that is, jump off a bridge. Go see Mike.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Mike.
You're done here, dude. You're done.
You're done.
And it's the wizard. It's Gandalf telling you this. It's like the Sorting Hat going, oh, this kid's done. Get him the fuck out of here.
Better be Slytherin.
Yeah, no money in it.
Fuck this shit. So yeah, he and the driver are gonna take tandem drives going back to Jersey, because that's where he goes after he gets out of the Gates of Horn.
Yep.
And they pass through Akron, so he sees Akron, which is where his 2-year-old child lives.
Well, very
with Diane.
Specifically, the guy he's hitching with is asleep, so he's driving. So
and there's
alone in silence, they pass the exit to Akron. That's the whole
and
scene.
He is literally the one driving at this point. And such tense shots for just such little effort. The shots of the way the camera moves from the highway to kind of what your field of view would be when you're exiting a highway. That's what the camera does to reveal the sign and keep the sign in frame.
Oh God,
and it just keeps cutting back and forth between him looking. They're like, oh, is he gonna do it? Is he gonna do it? Is he gonna do it? And it just passes by, and he's just
this is one
forward.
Of the, to me,
it's so tense.
Most standout moments of the film. For my money, this is the greatest impact a scene of inaction or lack of action has ever had on me in the history of film. The fact that with only a couple lines of setup previous in the film, it's a scene of a guy driving straight and not exiting and just passing a sign that says Akron. And in the theater, I fucking burst into tears, dude. Like, that's your chance at happiness, motherfucker.
You're done, dude.
Don't you see?
You could reinvent yourself.
You could reinvent yourself, and you just choose not to because you want to value art over family, over anything else that's not art. And you just do it to yourself. You do, and that's what really hurts.
So while further down the way, while it's snowing, it gets a little less. Things get a little less visible.
Gotta say though, in that moment, I love, and I don't know if it's intentional, but I love this reading of it. You were describing the perfect, smooth, Steadicam turn, and it is great.
Yeah.
As it turns, a car that looks very much like the car he's driving,
Mhm.
parallel to him,
also-
does
yeah.
take the exit to Akron. So
Of course.
if you're talking like the double slit experiment or quantum waveforms or Schrodinger's cat, if you're talking in
He's
this
seen
arena,
himself,
which the Coens are
yeah.
interested in, because I swear to God, they reference it a lot. The uncertainty principle, basically. It comes up in
Yeah.
their work all the time. Man who wasn't there. So it's like you see his car split off in an alternate reality and go off and try a different way of
observing
life, and he watches
the
it go.
experiment,
He
changes
just
it,
watches
yeah.
it go. Yeah. Ooh.
It's that it can both be true. It can, it's just, but in this case, it's
The
not,
reality
because
we're in,
left
he
with,
skipped it.
because we recorded it and therefore we
Yeah.
changed it, and the recording of it is the passing of time.
Then what happens,
And what changed
Daddy?
is then further along the way, while it snows, he hits an orange-haired tabby cat, blood on the fender. and the cat
Literally a
is-
Schrodinger's cat, because there's no way to possibly know if it's
Yeah.
the cat he abandoned or not. We'll never know.
But it's the cat he abandoned. It's how many orange-haired tabby cats are just kicking it on
it's
the
symbolic.
highway.
But then how did that cat get out
On
of
the way
the
to
car?
Akron.
I guess when John Goodman woke up and opened the door.
Yeah, of course.
Why would that cat? That's the thing, is because later, and we'll unpack this more in pedagogy, but there's a pointed moment that almost seems extraneous until you think deeply about it, where he looks at a movie poster for the movie that came out that year, The Incredible Journey, the Disney movie. Do you think that that's part of that movie poster is not foreshadowing, but post-shadowing, that the cat he hit was trying to return to him? Like, was trying to
So-
come home, so it came to his car, so he hit it? Is that the thing?
So we have a rodent in exit, and I just want to ask you right now, Swaim, do you mind if I just rush through the end right now so we can answer that question fully? Because I feel like there's a bunch of stuff that happens and it resolves it, but like I feel like we can quickly go through the final.
Yeah.
bits of
Let's
the
plow
movie.
on. I highlighted it.
Let's
so
plow
we'll
on.
come back. Okay. So he hits the cat. The cat limps away into the snowy night while snow falls, and this is important, reverberant diegetic opera plays, which A, makes it haunting, but is also a setup later, because the car door is open and opera's on the radio. So then the next,
He
he's
goes
given
back
up
to
on
Jersey.
music. He's going to take his sister's advice and join the Merchant Marines. You go.
And he hasn't, but when he gets there, he hasn't paid his dues, so he can't ship out.
a catch-22.
So he pays to, he has to pay to get a job, so he now has no more money. Then he visits his dad as a convalescent home, plays a song, and of
His dad
course
shits his pants.
shits his pants because he's old.
I would argue
And he-
that
it's kind of a wonder.
well, it's another Schrodinger's cat. His expression,
Mm-hmm.
very intentionally, we'll never know, and I think it's intentional that it truly is uncertain whether he was moved by his son's song and then also shit his pants because he's old, or shit his pants as a statement on the song. It could be either, and it's very
don't know.
believably either. Yeah. Okay, keep going.
So he goes back to Joy to get a shipping license, but after the previous visit to his sister, he told her to throw all that stuff out. So now he doesn't have a shipping license. So he returns to Jean and Jim's, tells her that he's out, he's going back to the Merchant Marine, and he turns down a gig at Poppy's, which is, the place that we saw before, the venue that Jean and Jim frequent. He returns to the dock, takes the $85 to replace takes $85 to repurchase the license, get his unions back, but he doesn't have that job, and it still has no money. So he just had to spend money to get the license. He has to wait for it, can't get that job. He just spent $285 to not
We
have
thought he was a
anything.
zero, and it turns out he could go even deeper. Now he's like completely
Right.
fucked. And the movie, again,
And he literally pulls out like a few dollars.
the movie ends with uncertainty in the sense that you still don't know what his job's going to be or how he's going to feed himself or where he's going to
Yeah.
live when the movie ends. I also think it's important that he's judgmental all the way up to the end. He doesn't change in that regard.
No,
His
he's
sister
not.
says, "How was it seeing Dad?" And he says, "Oh, great. It's good to see what I have to look forward to. Sure, you put in hard years, but it obviously all pays off." Being super sarcastic. And then he says, "I'm a fucking dick, right?" And she says, "Yeah." So he's judgmental to the end, and that's important.
He takes the gig at the Gaslight now because now he has no
For like
money.
old time's sake,
and
and to make
Poppy's-
a couple bucks,
and-
yeah.
Yeah. And then he has a scene with Poppy where he implies that he fucked Jean to allow her to play the Gaslight, which is like just Poppy the whole time has just been like he's ridiculous.
He represents
kind of
the
a
worst audience member.
impulses.
He's crass.
Yeah,
and
he's like their friend, but they'll be fine with his bullshit in order to get.
They're
gigs.
like, you're a big
out.
supporter of folk music. You let all the folk
Yeah.
people play here. Yeah, because they all suck my dick and it makes X amount of money. It's like the worst
Exactly.
way to
It's the worst
appreciate
type.
art. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a commentary on how much they're actually sellouts because they'll do anything to just get a gig if it means they look like to people that they're like exactly what they want to look like. But that's my own.
Yeah,
reading.
but Jean is in a tragic position as well, I think. Yeah.
She really is. Llewyn gets drunk and angry because of all these reasons, and he starts to heckle just a precious old lady who's playing her first gig in New York. And he just ruins everything. She's up there with the auto harp, and she's just trying to sing her song, and he's just laying into her. And he even goes to the point that he pushes Poppy out of the way while he's trying to be restrained.
Yeah.
So he's got like no job, no gig, no place to stay. And
can I just, I want to say, because the impact is important, it's
Yes.
very intentionally, I think, the first time where he's so over the line, even after all he's been through and understanding what desperation he's in, they intentionally set up a situation where you're like, there's no excuse, though. Like, you're a dick now. This is, like, fucked up. You're a jerk.
Yeah,
you're being unnecessarily cruel.
Truly all is lost.
So he says, where's your hay bale? Where's your corncob pipe? Why aren't you wearing gingham panties? Show us your panties. I hate fucking folk music. I fucking hate folk music. And as they drag him out, he says to the line out front, the fucking show is bullshit for Mix and Grandma Moses, referring to 4 guys who sang Irish sea shanties and the lady. And it's like, it's the dark night of the soul, but not even in terms of his desperation, but in terms of he's lost himself to like, now he's cruel. Now he is an asshole. It's all validated. Yeah.
Yeah, he's becoming Roland.
So in desperation, he goes back to the Gorfiends, the squares that can always be counted on because they are white and rich and they have guilt and they want to feel like artists. So they not only forgive him, but like, they're like, don't even worry about what an asshole you were last time. They're like overwhelmingly
we
kind.
love you.
Yeah.
One of the guests also mentions, have you listened to Please Mr. Kennedy, and talks about how royalties will be
and how
made.
it's a hit on the radio and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so it's just like, salt in the wound.
Randomly they find out that their cat came back, and we find out this is the original cat he lost in the second scene. And we find out, the audience, that his name is Ulysses, and
that's his name.
And it's important because he goes, that's its name? And it's funny because nothing more is said of it, but it's like, hey, audience, I don't know, if you want a clue to unlocking this movie, start here. The cat's name is Ulysses.
Yeah,
think about that.
that's it.
We'll get to
That's
it
all
shortly.
they give you.
He wakes up in a start. The cat's purring on his chest. He walks back to the Gaslight to have his gig. Even though he got thrown out, Poppy's like, again, he's kind in his own fucked up way. He's like, I don't care. People are assholes. People get in fights. You can still play here. On the way, he passes a movie poster for Incredible Journey, and he Ferris Bueller's it. He stares at it for a while, and it zooms in on it. And the tagline is, nothing but instinct to guide them across 200 miles of Canadian wilderness. It is a precursor of Homeward Bound, a Disney movie about
Right.
2 cats and a dog surviving in the wild.
Right.
He gets to the gig. He says, one more song before I go, then I gotta go. And he plays Fare Thee Well, which is the song he played in the first scene. You realize the
And
first
this is the
scene is the
repeat.
last scene, but there's an additional
guy out there
shot
in the-
as he leaves the venue because Poppy says someone wanted to see you in the alley. We see fucking restored footage and like CG insertion of Bob Dylan, young Bob Dylan, coming up and delivering what has to be one of his very first performances ever. And he starts with a different song, but a song that's also called Fare Thee Well. So, yeah, they're playing different versions of the same song, and they are like mirror images of each other as he leaves for the alley. We find out that the guy from the beginning who beat him up was Betty's husband, the old woman he heckled. So now you're like, oh, when I first saw this, I thought it was a precious art flower getting trampled by a cruel man. Now I'm kind of on the dude's side. Like, Llewyn should get his ass kicked for this.
Yeah, you piece of shit. She just wanted to play a gig in New York one time on like a bucket
It was her
list thing.
dream. My wife
you
up there
fucked it.
trying to fucking sing, and he punches him. Like, this whole movie, in a sense, is the one line from Oh Brother, you're not wrong, you're just an asshole. That's like the whole theme.
Big Lebowski.
Big Lebowski, sorry. And then I think very importantly, Llewyn hobbles, wounded, out of the alley while we hear diegetic folk music echoing in the alley really reverberantly, just like the fucking cat walking into the
I was just going to say he
woods.
howls like a cat.
Yeah, he says meow and licks his hands and pets his nose. And very importantly as well, which is the message that Llewyn could never get, I think, and the reason we see all these people that have all these dreams is the husband says, he goes, people talk, man. It's not the fucking opera. It's a show. And he goes, it wasn't your show, asshole. Like, it's not always your show. Life is not always your show. And you can try to make it your show. You will suffer. Life will not lose that fight.
No.
He says au revoir and waves goodbye to the guy, and that's the end of the movie. Pedagogy.
Yes.
Okay, you start.
So this movie is kind of a brand new Coen. I mean, we talked about A Serious Man.
Yeah.
But it's very strange because a reason I think it's in its own category a little bit is because, like, in this podcast, we've been kind of analyzing their work as a dichotomy of films being like nihilistic or not. In Fargo, for example, Jerry Lundegaard is overreaching and petty. His comeuppance is that he's left
more
with
of a
nothing
classic
and
Greek
arrested.
tragedy, yeah.
Yeah, including neoclassical.
Yeah.
Like he causes deaths of multiple people indirectly due to his actions. In No Country, for example, though, people die who do not deserve it. Car crashes wreck plans. Serendipity runs amok.
There is no God in Cormac McCarthy's world. Yeah.
This movie is hard to pin down because the characters are very nebulous. Most are shown like in a pivotal or transitionary moment in their lives, but at the same time, nothing plot-wise is advancing them towards like immediate choices. Right? Mm-hmm. They're just kind of, especially our protagonist is just kind of like, he chooses to go to Chicago because it was offered to him. And he realizes, hey, you know what? Bud Grossman is there, even though he doesn't outrightly even say it. He doesn't have a want other than just to exist and be, he does have a want, which is to be like admired for his folk art, but he's not actively doing that day to day, really. He's not doing something and overreaching. He's not doing something and making an active choice. He's kind of just trying to get there and complaining about the life not giving him his moment.
He's complaining about the fact that life has randomness and owes you nothing, which is something I struggle with constantly, of like thinking, if I haven't achieved XYZ career goal, it must be because I suck. You know, like reverse engineering it.
Yeah.
It must be that I don't deserve it, or I'm not talented enough to achieve that. And it's
the fraud thing. It's
imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
It's stunning to me because the Coen brothers, I don't think have firsthand experience with that, or at the time they're making this film, it's been a long time, dude, because of all the artists in our medium to walk the face of the goddamn earth. They must know and be aware that it did kind of work out for them. Like, just like us, you and me, man, their dream was, I just want to make a movie about whatever I want. I just want to tell the people the story, and I want all the resources I need to do that. And they got it at a young enough age that they got to pump out 12 whatevers, like whatever the fuck they want. That is the dream. Like, that is full artistic fulfillment, I think, and not a lot of people get that. You're talking Kubrick, Anderson, Coen brothers, like the heavy hitters. The fact that they can identify with such searing honesty and truth what the pain of not getting that. Do you know what I mean? How can they?
Yeah, absolutely.
How can they write this
would it be any
screenplay? They
different?
didn't live through this. They won the lotto.
They absolutely did, though. They did, but they also lived the other thing. You know, like it's just the amount of time that we've spent in one situation and they spent in that situation. It's also second guessing each other for, you know, it's being able to sympathize with that thought. Having to walk in someone's shoes doesn't. Yes, that is key to empathy, but for sympathy, it only really needs to be thought about and,
Yes.
on a deeper level, which is what they're capable of. I don't know the amount of grief that they've had in their life.
Exactly.
But they can speak very eloquently about grief.
Exactly. And I just have to imagine that, like, some of that comes from their prodigious sympathy and writing ability. It just blows my mind that, like, the fucking range, dude. The guys who wrote this wrote Hudsucker Proxy and Barton Fink. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Delightful.
I guess I mean to say that these characters feel like their outlooks, like the trivial things they get angry about. Now, the abortion is kind of the exception to the rule because it's the theme of the movie.
How trivial.
And it serves as a symbol of what the movie is about, yeah. But all these random things like Lost Cats, bad folk song lyrics,
and abortion,
who and where will they sleep and stuff like that. All these things express about how they feel about one thing, but no one talks about the whole movie. The plot doesn't have important consequences because, like Mike and the abortion, like it's kind of dead on arrival.
Although you just made me realize
just in the transition.
You just made me realize, which I had not realized till this very moment. A baby that you don't know who the father is another fucking Schrodinger's cat, dude.
Yes,
they're
exactly.
fucking everywhere.
They're fucking everywhere. It's fucked up.
It's fucked up, man.
That's why what I mean when I say it's like a classic morality play that isn't a classic morality play, and it's about grief.
What do you mean?
Is because so grief is something that you can be in one instance happy and you can be in one instance sad. It's the paradox that we live in our lives that humans can be alive and be dead. And we can, like, time writes it down, but ultimately, like, the human experience and the human condition is like living with consequences of events happening. And ultimately they can all be true. And that is like the kind of uncertainty principle we have to live with, that paradox every day. And grief is just the way it manifests itself individually. It's just like, I can be at a funeral and just start laughing.
Say your George Bernard Shaw quote, you want to.
No, that's actually not
it applies though. Fine.
It does apply. It applies to
everything.
Then
I'll say my bare naked ladies quote. I'm the kind of guy who will laugh at a funeral. Don't understand what I mean? Well, you soon will. Let's move on.
Yeah. You soon will. But do you know what I mean? Like how grief is kind of the Schrodinger's cat.
And if he's the cat,
emotion.
He saves the cat. He loves the cat. He loses the cat. He abuses the cat. He abandons the cat. Those are all positions I take with myself internally all the time. Yes.
Right. And they don't all happen at once necessarily, but they happen, like you can feel that way about all those things at the same time.
And I think it speaks to, in fact, this is something about filmmaking and all storytelling, is that storytelling exists to streamline and categorize events to make a sensible story that seems like it doesn't have too many extraneous pieces that don't mean anything, because that way it's clear and you get the moral or the point or the strong emotional response that you wanted. If it's horror or whatever, you just want to be scared and it did that.
Right.
It's amazing to me that, again, which the Coens love, this film's giving you pure uncertainty, and yet no one for a second is like, this feels just like Serious Man. This feels just like No Country for Old Men, even though at their core they're all obsessed with the same points and themes and truths of life. Like you do when you deep dive into an artist, you always find, what are they obsessed with? And I think we've gotten there with the Coen brothers, and I'm really pleased by that. Because coming in, I knew there was like a nihilist streak, but I think I understand it so much more deeply now and more specifically. It's not sheer nihilism. It's the uncertainty principle is deeply fascinating to them.
Yeah, I think the paradox of being human is another way of saying it.
And the idea that if you don't streamline that, like in real life, real life, I don't know about you, but if I monitor my emotional state, for example, my cat just died, Lamar, who's a great cat. You knew him. He's great. So I'm really sad, right? But then there's obviously like a second later, if something distracts me, I can forget and laugh about something and then remember and get sad again. And stories avoid that because it's confusing and messy. But I think this is a story that nods to man, don't you ever get the feeling that every second you inhabit 100 different emotional spaces? When you actually step back and look at your emotional state, it's almost wildly incongruous because, like, it's not like a
if
movie.
I'm in the middle of feeling one and I just start to think about a different one,
Right.
and then I can just like switch.
It's not like a movie where, oh, their husband died, so that character, he's going to be sad for every day, every second of every day until his grief processes, and then won't be sad in a later scene.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, the next day you could laugh at a commercial because you forget for a second, and then you cry because you remember. This shit is wild. It goes all over the map.
Yeah, because other days I
It's like a
am
cat.
like seeped in
It's like herding
a
cats.
funk, or I'm seeped in a function, and I hit that same switch that usually can work where I can like transport myself to a different emotion. It just doesn't work. And I'm just like, well, what the fuck? I thought you told me the rules, brain.
Yes.
You told me how this works, and then today you're just not going to work. That's exactly like a cat.
Yes.
Yeah, they're like,
It's like
oh, it
herding
works to say.
cats.
I just like usher him, and he went back inside. Or this time, he's just like, I'm not fucking moving. You know, it's just like, all right, I don't know the rules
Yeah.
that operate this machinery. So it's a fucking ride, man.
And yeah, one pattern is that they show repeatedly that there are opportunities that he could have taken to access joy from other quadrants of life. Like actually bonding with a cat, or like, why couldn't he own his own cat, or see his son, or take that job in the trio that Bud Grossman offered. So it's like, and I do think this is true of life, a bunch of it is random. Talent doesn't guarantee success. But some of it, things are more likely to turn out one way or the other based on how you behave. If you're a judgmental dick all the time, it's way more likely you will end up alone and cynical and bitter. There were opportunities for you, Llewyn, to access joy from a different, unexpected direction. You abdicated all those opportunities.
Yeah, just fucking spark joy, Lou.
Spark joy, Lou. And what's amazing is your music does spark joy, and you can't even appreciate it anymore. That's how far gone.
Because they gotta love it in the way that you want them to love it. I want to talk more about the cats.
Sure.
What do you think that the cat is symbolic of?
All right, so here's my theory, and I came to this without internet research, so there might be a more cohesive version online. But when I realized the cat's name is Ulysses, and Ulysses is, Greek and Roman have different names for similar things.
Odysseus.
It's Odysseus. Obviously, yet again, like Oh Brother, he does go on a meandering, wandering journey. But I also think it's very important that he sees that poster for Incredible Journey, the Disney movie, because it's about cats. There's a dog in there too, but there's two cats, and he is a cat, as is established. He's a cranky loner who's weird.
It's a duo.
Is
also important.
It's a duo, and it's about trusting your instincts and finding your way home. And he
It's Milo.
trusts his instincts and doesn't find his way home. Which I think
Right.
is that uncertainty and there's no promises thing. Very pointedly, Odysseus gets everything he wanted. That's the Odyssey. He gets home, he gets his wife back, he gets his kid back, he kills everyone who hit on his wife while he was gone.
Yep.
And
He beats
it's
all
great.
the awesome
Yeah.
monsters and stuff.
And to me, that's the full. So what blew my mind, if it's intentional, is Ulysses and Odysseus, by their very nature, are two names that are both common that represent the same thing. The Incredible Journey is an adaptation of the Odyssey, which again raises the specter of two facets of what boils down to the same thing. I would argue that Incredible Journey is famous mostly for the fact that it's been overshadowed by Homeward Bound, the more recent Disney movie about animals finding their way home.
Right.
So it's like Incredible Journey is also a notable dual thing, like Ants and Bugs Life. And it's just all beautifully, structurally supporting this overwhelming feeling that this movie is about alternate, parallel versions of things. Llewyn Davis is Bob Dylan in an alternate reality where he's equally talented, but the algorithm of life didn't go his way. And the movie is about the fact that any true artist must finally face imposter syndrome and either beat it or be beaten by it. Either you think your art is worth doing because it helps people in some way, or you just like it yourself, or you accept that you have a talent, you have a knack for it, or you just enjoy it, or you don't. And you measure your artistic successes only by the level of achievement and respect you get from the outside world, and things like, is it deep? Is it important? Does it represent my pain? And if you peg your self-worth to only that, you either win the lottery and become Bob Dylan, or you will be absolutely crushed. Like, you've painted yourself into a corner where those are the stakes. And so he's Bob Dylan if Bob Dylan didn't win the lottery. And I really do believe, like, there are more talented people that deserve to make movies than there are budgets to make movies. So from a certain point onward, it's like, hang out in this waiting room, keep your skills sharp, stay talented. The lottery ball will come down every once in a while, and one of you will get to go make a movie. Some of you will wait in this room your entire lives. So you better find something like enjoyable to do to pass the time, or you're going to be fucked. And that's what I think the movie's about to me.
Is that, and where's the cat play and all of that?
Oh, that's what I think it's, well, first of all, I think it's literally meant to invoke the image of Schrodinger's cat, because it's a cat, but also because, Llewyn goes in and out of doors. It would be his spirit animal. You can see why. Oscar Isaacs has soulful, mysterious eyes. He's a loner.
I think he's tied to it by his name. I think what the cat represents to me mostly.
Well, you're a Joyce scholar too. I want to hear your Joyce connections.
Right. So the reason that Joyce is even in this conversation is that he was equally subversive. So he was the guy who did the same exact thing that you just said to Odyssey and subverted it in the way that, like, Telemachus is like a abandoned son, as is Penelope an abandoned wife and stuff like that, and it's all about the Odyssey.
Is that fitting?
And Leopold Bloom's.
Sorry, is that fitting? No, which one is Leopold Bloom? I don't even know.
Ulysses.
Okay, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ulysses. Well, that makes sense because it's called Ulysses.
Leopold Bloom is a guy who kind of just travels around town, ambles. He's kind of a peddler.
I didn't know that was based on the Odyssey. Okay.
Yeah, it's all the chapters are broken off into sirens and locust eaters and stuff like that. And that kind of falls, like, I want to keep talking about the Odyssey, but just quickly a word on cats. I think that the cat is really is representative of Llewyn, obviously, through all the things. There's even more citations, but
there's tons of connections. It's clear.
There's tons of connections.
He's the cat.
But if you just think of it, okay, that's what the Coen brothers are doing. Well, it's just the mere actions of what the cat does and what he does to the cat that becomes interesting, because he's constantly losing the cat. He's either trying to get the cat to go somewhere, trying to get it back somewhere,
thinking he has it back, but he was wrong. It's illusory.
So when that context starts, I think a theme starts to form, which is that you can tie the cat, essentially to what Llewyn's self-identity is and where he's at in his life. So if he's the cat and he's abandoning it or he's losing it, it has to deal in the wake of all of this fucking suicide of Mike. And so when he loses the cat, he's losing, like, his own version of himself that's holding on to Mike. When he abandons his cat, he's losing the authenticity of it being a musician.
Right, and
it's all subtext.
And when Lillian sings Mike's part, that's what tips him over the edge. So it's like saying, maybe other people would deal with their grief by wanting it to be filled with loving support. I don't. I want the whole. I want Mike to still feel gone and missing. Don't fill in Mike's part. I want to meditate on Mike not being here. There's a lot of conversation to be had, and I'll never know the answer as long as I live, whether that's like healthy and what needs to happen, or whether it's blocking love and healing out, but that's how he operates.
Yeah. It's how there's a scene we referenced the scene where she says, everything you do turns to shit, Jean to Llewyn, where they talk about leaving the window open, but it's winter. That's Gene saying, literally, I'm moving on.
Yeah.
You are keeping the window open to keep this stupid
pain coming
idea that
in.
Mike is still alive or something.
Yeah.
And that you need to wallow in this self-pity of how it's ruined you and how it's sad. And yes, it is. But I'm moving forward. I want to have a baby with Jim. I want to do things with my life. Llewyn, you're just... you don't even know
She's
what
like,
where
I'm
you're
actually ready to close the window and light a cozy fire, and who
going.
cares?
And fucking let the cat
Who
die,
cares if
or
I happen to be
whatever.
wearing an Old Navy sweater or I'm a sellout? Like, I'm ready to close the window
Yeah.
against the harsh elements. And he's like, no, I want the open window with the wind cutting me. Yeah, he fetishizes his pain, which is often, that's another huge, I think, trap that artists fall into, is that if this art comes from pain, it's more important. It becomes more important. It's the reason the movies that win Oscars and comedies don't. Even though craftsmanship-wise, they're equally challenging.
Exactly. And it's like, so we're literally seeing how a man is mismanaging guilt, and he's letting the ghosts that shouldn't, but are haunting him. Like, it's a great device. I want also for you, just because we can't have an episode of fucking Coen brothers without like just what do the Coens brothers have to say about this?
Sure.
And I found this interview when want to know what Joel Coen has to say about the cat? There's a quote.
Wait. Let me guess. Oh, I don't know. We were just hammering out the scripts over a long weekend, and I saw a dog, and Ethan was like, what about a cat? And I was like, I don't care. Put it in. Is it something like that, Abe? Because that's what they always say, the fuckers.
It's eerily close.
Okay.
His quote is, the film doesn't really have a plot. That concerned us at one point, so we threw the cat in.
You are full of shit, Coen brothers.
No one is listening to your shit, Joel. All right? You're dunking on no one.
My favorite thing about the Coen brothers. You think J.J. Abrams is the king of the mystery box? No, it's the Coen brothers. It's going a whole career.
Just with themselves.
It's going
not
a
about
whole
the
career.
Story, it's themselves.
Creating meticulously crafted structuralist, I would argue, from like the structuralist school of thought, art. And titling your gallery show like, I don't know, whatever, in Comic Sans font. It's like, fuck you, you know what you're doing, dude. Shut up.
You might as well be in an interview. If you're the Coen brothers, you might as well be interviewing a baby that every time you ask a question of like, you did a really interesting like symbolism maneuver. What is that what you intended? And they put their finger to their fucking lips and go, I don't know.
Yeah. And then they paint a Picasso. And you're like, great.
And you're just like, I fucking hate this baby. So yeah, that's what I think about the cat. And there's also there's kind of another thing about it. Like there's a doppelcat. There's an authentic
there's
cat.
There's either two or three cats. It's uncertain, which I love.
Yeah. And I think that the reason that's done is more for the Schrodinger's aspect of it. But I think it's literally when you look at the structure of the film, it's when the cat pivots from being, it's Act 1 cat versus Act 2 cat. And it pivots from the cat literally represent what Act 1 is dealing with, which is him not moving on from Mike, and Act 2 cat where he will not move away from his own quote unquote version of authenticity. So there's like authentic. So it's funny. There's like the real cat, the authentic cat that's about like the grief cat. And then there's the second cat, which is the doppelcat, which is actually the authenticity cat. I don't know. I just wanted to point that out. I think that's true. Like, as there's two cats, there's two symbolic meanings we're supposed to pull from those cats.
Right, because the thing about Llewyn and what makes him a tragic figure is his grief comes from a real place, but he not only wants to dwell in his grief and takes on more grief, he abdicates chances to process grief or go toward joy. It's both. Yeah, so there's more than one cat. Yeah. All right. You got more? I'm out of pedagogy. Go ahead.
I got two. I have one little bit. I have two small things. One is about the great man,
called your
which
testicles, my friend.
The great man, which is something that was not penned by me. That's something that I read a thing from the Dude's Paper, which is a website about Coen Brothers symbology and I assume trivia. But the writer's Todd Alcott, which he was the one who found out, which is like a great epiphany to me that almost all filmmakers at a certain point have a great man that represents authority, and you can find it in every single one of those films. I think that that's a really, like, I'm surprised I didn't come to that realization, because we talked about how they all kind of deal with crime. We talk about how they all have to kind of deal with nihilism or Schrodinger's uncertainty principle, but we never really talked about the fact that they have this very flirtatious kind of experience with authority, where they always kind of play authority the same way, where it's either they are being hunted by an authoritative figure, like, Brother with the sheriff, and he's an oppressive force, or they have an authority, or like Paul Newman in Hudsucker Proxy, or they have another version of authority that is someone who it's all leading up to, like the Wizard of Oz, like in this movie or in A Serious Man. I just think it's kind of interesting. Or the, Big Lebowski, the Lebowski. Yeah. There's always someone who it's like all power kind of descends from.
Yeah.
And I thought that this one was particularly interesting.
That's
with
a
Bud.
Nietzsche thing too, the Übermensch.
Yeah, it's kind of the Übermensch. Yeah. I thought there was a few little moments that you go, oh, that's kind of interesting, in how Llewyn deals with Bud. For example, like, one of the things is that he will not play like as a monkey, or what does he say? I'm not a trained
poodle.
I'm not a trained poodle.
This isn't a fucking performance parlor.
Right. He won't do that for the gore finds, but he will do it for someone like Grossman.
Sure. And who's based on a real guy, Albert Grossman, who did manage Bob Dylan and Peter, Paul, and Mary.
He will play to Johnny Five and Roland to irritate them. He is a sellout. There's always a nature of sellout.
Is that selling out? Yeah,
because
it's like
you gotta pay a big pop of capital.
Or is any success right? And it's the same moral sliding scale of like, am I a good person? Well, I could sell all my possessions, give everything to the poor, move to the poorest place in the world, and spend the rest of my life only helping like the worst off people I can find. I don't do that. Does that make me bad? Everything's on a scale that's very long.
And here's another thing the paper pointed out about that meeting that I thought was good, which is that you picked up, but I didn't even know, that the song he plays at the Gate of Horn is The Death of Queen Jane, which is, just for the listeners, a song about a woman in a difficult labor, and that she asks her husband, King Henry, to cut her open and perform a C-section.
Save the baby. Yeah.
To save the baby. And he refuses because he's worried about it might kill both of them. And because he can't choose, his indecision kills her, even though the baby does live. So it's just like, if you were ever to look at a morality tale that is less clear, like, it's that.
Yeah.
It's like, what are the results of your actions?
Was it
Very
worth
mixed.
It? Who can say? How do you value that life versus that life, etc.? Yeah.
Such a perfect way to represent the great man with all of his authority of not being able to give you options, and also the uncertainty principle as a whole as a theme for this film.
And a struggling artist who longs for commercial success, but specifically because they actually have an authentic relationship to art and their craft, and they just want to reach people. That's a question you ask yourself constantly is, people go like, yeah, but is it worth it? All this hustling and dealing with shallow producers and LA toxicity you have to do. And you're like, it will be if I ever one day get to make a movie. If not, then it won't have been. And I don't get to know until later. It fucking sucks.
And then to put on top of all of this, the fact that Llewyn has a child. So the child did live, and the queen, so his choice, his lack of decision caused a different result in his time stream. The fact that he's going to have an aborted child with Jean, and the fact that he's singing this all as a kind of symbolic effort in order to save his career.
To sell out, essentially. Yeah.
Symbolically look at it, might also be another read of it. Could be that it could be this situation where that Llewyn feels that he is Queen Jane with the gift of music inside of himself, willing to die so that the baby may live. Or it could be that the King Henry and Queen Jane is his music, and he feels forced to choose between killing the music to save the baby. This is all, again, stuff that Todd Alcott said. This is not mine, but I just thought it was really, really interesting.
That's
and
good shit.
it folds right up into our uncertainty principle stuff.
Nice.
The only thing I want to, like, we don't really do howdy do dats unless it's something to be spoken. The only
I have
thing
howdy do dats.
Okay, I'm happy to move on to howdy
We
do
always
dat.
do howdy do dats. What are you talking
Well, sometimes
about?
we skip past it and only
Third
do like one or
Spectra
two.
howdy do dat, which is behind the scenes nonsense and fun. Basically just reading the IMDb trivia page and shouting out stuff that's interesting. But building off of your point that they said the film doesn't have a plot, so we threw in the cat. These motherfuckers, dude. These motherfuckers. They also said, so famously during the production of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, during the promotional tour, I think they just come up with in-jokes to do during the promotional tours. Because during Oh Brother, they repeatedly said they'd never read the Odyssey, which is possible because Oh Brother, mainly the points that connect are just the tropes of the Odyssey. And I'm aware of them without having read the Odyssey. Although I have read the Odyssey, brag. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm aware of the sirens anyway as a cultural concept.
Yeah.
But during the promotional tour for this movie in 2013, they told Terry Gross on Fresh Air, no, we still haven't gotten around to reading it, because they pointed out that the Odyssey also has imprints on this, and the cat's name is Ulysses. One of them said to Gross, quote, yeah, it's right by my bedside table. I keep looking over at it over the years and going, ugh. Like, I don't want to read it because it's boring.
Like that's so actually now, might be the least
They're tipping that now. It's clear
that's
that
a little
they're
too far.
They're
like making jokes about how like obvious they are with their bullshit. That's so like ugh. I mean, I know, right, guys? Because at this point they're being like Wizard of Oz and the Odyssey. It's all of our films, right?
Yeah. And an interviewer asked them, Dave Van Ronk, the famous folk singer, who many people consider like the Bob Dylan who never made it. He has an album called Inside Llewyn Davis, and on the cover there's a cat like with him.
Dave Van Gogh.
What does that mean? And they were like, that doesn't mean anything.
Oh,
in fact,
that's fucking cool.
Our art designer pointed out in post-production, did you guys know you put a cat in the movie and there's a cat on the album cover? And we were like, what a cool coincidence.
No way. They actually said that? We didn't notice
the quote is let me find the quote.
That's fucking hilarious.
The quote is, we hadn't even noticed the cat on Van Ronk's cover until we completed shooting and the art director pointed out the coincidence. No way. No fucking way.
That's like, he literally is playing at the same time at the Greenwich Village music scene. Like the clubs are actually like Gaslight and stuff. Like they're literally pulling from history.
Yes.
And then they're acting.
For sure. The Irish guys who sing sea shanties, which, by the way, I think this is pretty sharp. They each have a different cream-colored cable knit sailor sweater, but each sweater is unique, if you notice. The knitting pattern is different on each of the four. They have and that was a signature of the Clancy brothers, who are a real pop folk like quadrology during this time. How sweet would this have been, dude? According to IMDb trivia, although there was talk of nominating Please Mr. Kennedy for Best Original Song Oscar, the Academy was barred to do so by the fact that it is actually an amalgam of melodies and components of other famous folk novelty songs.
It's such a bizarre.
So
isn't that all music?
I love the idea that they wrote this movie about selling out and a guy who doesn't want to sell out, and the most sellout song, the Academy Awards are like, that should win the Oscar. And you're like, yeah, exactly, motherfuckers. This movie's about you too. Like, this movie is about the funniness of, I think, awards in Hollywood as well.
Yeah, absolutely it is. This was not shot by Roger Deakins, who's shooting Skyfall.
No, that's an important point. Far inferior film. Sorry, Bond fans.
He, of course, Bruno Delbon, I think is how you say his name, was the guy.
I think.
Yeah. He was nominated for the Oscar for Best Cinematography, and it was his fourth nomination in 13 years. I just want to pulling this from IMDb right now. Deakins, who is British, has been nominated 14 times, more than that now. 5 of those films for the Coens. So it's just like they'll just take anybody who's like, they'll always make them
polished.
like, it's just crazy to me how like, yes, cinematography is a great art. There are people who are like your big hitters, like the Ellswitz and the Deakins. But if you get to shoot a Coen Brothers movie, you are at least getting nominated.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you probably won't win for some reason.
Not Hail Caesar, but that's a topic for tomorrow.
Yeah.
They hated working with the cats. The trainer warned them cats can't be trained really. And I just love they have said that they have tons of B-roll of cats doing different things than they wanted the cat to do. If anyone's interested in that. Are you kidding me? Coen Brothers caliber footage of cats just fucking around. Everyone's interested in that.
I want to see all of that.
It's the internet, man.
It's the internet.
They also said that even the trained vulture they worked with while making True Grit was more trainable than the cats. Although the bird of prey had been, quote, by vulture standards, probably a stupid vulture.
I bet that was Joel.
How can you determine that, like Joel? Yeah, that's a very Joel thing.
That's a Joel thing to say. He's like, fucking dunk on this vulture right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a few things they did, still part of How Do You Do That, less trivia, but I thought they didn't play a lot of crazy tricks. They kept it pretty transparent most of the time, which is not crazy for the Coen Brothers, and we've kind of already talked about in past episodes like what they do, choosing to shoot inside the eye line and stuff like that. They do something where all apartment hallways and front doors are framed as vanishing points in this movie.
Yeah,
and the reason I think they do that because thematically or symbolically, there's only one way to go, and vanishing points operate. If you remember your first art class, it's like the first thing they teach you. They're diagonals that lead to a point in the frame, like usually center frame if you're looking down a road or something like that. So it focuses your eye to the center of the void. And if you're going to look at hallways and front doors as entrances and exits and journeys in this movie, there's only one way to go, in and center, or out and toward you. And that kind of gives relevance to like, it's almost like the filmmakers or the framing is trying to say to Llewyn, like, go here, go away from here. It also gives the opportunity for some good visual gags, like people trying to shuffle past each other in a way too narrow corridor.
But also the fact that he doesn't do things, he goes where he thinks he's supposed to go.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know how much it was intentional, but they clearly were they do it multiple times, so they're clearly like,
or it could
as a motif of this film.
Bonnell. It could be the cinematographer.
It's location.
Strategy.
You have to find those hallways, which maybe they're more. I haven't lived in New York.
It's a trope of folk life in the 60s that everyone lived in a shitty, unbelievably small Greenwich Village apartment.
Yeah,
so I think that's also a running
living.
visual joke.
Yeah, exactly.
Bud Grossman, the horrible shit he says is based on the real Al Grossman did say that to Mary Travers, stay out of the sun, as in your skin is too dark.
Oh, as in Peter
so that's
Paul
based
and Mary?
on a real story. Yeah, Mary Travers of Peter, Paul, and Mary. Sorry.
Wow, that's rough.
But it's like to realize folk music, which is all about authenticity and love or whatever. Mm-hmm. You're like, the producer was still your classic douchebag producer.
The reason Peter, Paul, and Mary was brought up, I think I mentioned it earlier. Dave Von Gronk auditioned for Peter, Paul, and Mary. When Albert Grossman was performing him, and was rejected for being too uncommercial. Yeah, uncommercial. So when Llewyn turns Bud down, it's like a super stupid move.
Speaking of auditions, some interesting people who auditioned for the role of Llewyn Davis, Casey Affleck. Definitely wouldn't have been as good as Oscar Isaac.
I see the appeal. He's got some tortured soul or whatever.
Setting his canceledness aside, but I still think Oscar Isaac's better. Michael Fassbender, I don't see. Too confident. Same reasoning on Ryan Reynolds' audition for Llewyn Davis. I don't
that's
really
weird.
see that. And Connor Oberst
Of
the lead singer of Bright Eyes.
Bright Eyes, the guy
I
sounds
love
like he's
Bright
underwater. Yeah, he's
Spoiler: Bright Eyes is like my oasis. Yeah, guilty pleasure.
I mean, he's not bad, but it just
dude, Bowl of Oranges.
Yeah,
Arc
there's
of
some
Time.
good tracks in there, man.
It's
Definitely good
lyrics
tracks.
mostly, but I'm a lyrics man, so.
Yeah, Sunrise, Sunset, I love that. It's a waltz.
Sunrise, Sunset makes me want to hang myself.
But like
Great.
his voice is so specific. He's almost like he's his own Dylan in the way of like, well, that sounds like him. That's got to be Connor Oberst.
Do you think Oscar Isaac and Adam Driver on the set of Star Wars ever look at each other and like,
hey man, remember
Man.
inside?
Llewyn Davis, remember making like sophisticated, challenging
Remember when we were kicking it around
storytelling?
with
Yeah.
JT?
Anyway, put your cape on. We got to get back to set.
Anyway, we're gonna don't blast me into space, dear, please, Mr.
Dear
Kennedy.
Mr. Kylo Ren.
And
don't
isn't
saber me.
Kennedy the name of one of the Star Wars producers?
Yeah, Kathleen Kennedy sort of runs
Kathleen.
the universe right now, the canon of the universe.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Um,
It's a conspiracy theory.
It's a
They knew who they were going to cast. The Coen
conspiracy.
brothers knew who they were going to cast for Star Wars.
Yeah. All right, dude. I
think
get
that's
outta
it.
here. Yeah, I think that is it.
What a long one. Might be our longest.
I think No Country was approaching 3 hours, but we're like 2:15. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks
Well,
for listening.
that makes
everyone.
sense to me. Like, if I had to predict before the whole show ran, hey, which one's going to be the longest episode? No Country for Old Men. Don't you think?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, we take as long to say the movie than it takes to watch the movie. I still don't understand why. We sometimes pepper stuff in. But
And yet you can tell we're both talking as fast as we can.
yeah, but I mean, it's just
Because
like, just go
it's
watch the
funny
movie
how-
and then skip the first half.
But we've both gotten the impression that we know Coen brothers are going to go super long. So unlike Frame Rates, where we're like, oh man, yeah, man, we're like, okay, Coen brothers, so we're going to do this. We're going to talk about this.
okay.
Then we're going to get here. Yeah. 'Cause it's a
You
lot
talk now? Okay, I gotta talk now. Yeah, we're
lot of shit to
actually
get
not
through,
that
man.
irate and like fast moving and normal.
Yeah.
Like we're usually pretty laid back guys, I'd say. But
Not for Coen.
for
It's
some reason on
accelerated.
podcasts, you and I are just we're just a million miles a second. It's weird. Anyway, That's all
Anywho, thanks for listening, everyone. Hope
This-
that enriched your experience with Inside Llewyn Davis. That is the point of the show, to sort of make you love the things you already love, but in a different way or even more so.
Yeah.
And I just want to say on the podcast, because I've only said it on Twitter, that as you probably noticed because you're listening to the podcast, other than off hours, everything Small Beans is still going full force, and we still very much use your patronage towards new projects. So
Yeah,
keep
and we're
it
making
coming
new stuff.
if you
We're
want
got
new
a new video
stuff.
series coming out
Yeah.
soonish. And
That's
we
all.
got a
Give us
audio,
money. That's all.
radio play. It's gonna be crazy.
Or, if you can't afford it or it's holiday times and times are tight, if you want to support the pod, go to Small Beans Audio on iTunes. Give us 5 stars and a nice comment. Or just listen. That's also fine. But,
Everything's fine. Just,
we
have a
never
good time.
self-plug, so it's been long enough. I'm like, yeah. Numbers are slipping a little. If you can spare $1 a month, get back in there. Maybe you were a patron before and you had to drop off. Get back in there. Get back in the mix. We'll make some cool shit.
Yeah.
That's Coen Brothers. I predict next episode will not be as long.
No, I predict that as well. This was a joy, Michael. As always.
Oh, yeah. As always.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye, buddy.